The first warning reached Dorothea Langford before the Duke did. It waited at her place beneath the white blaze of wedding candles, disguised as a line of elegant French on a card edged in gold, pour le silence de la maison. For the silence of the house. Dorothea read it twice, while the private chapel bells of Rothmere House faded behind the closed doors, and every guest pretended not to watch the new Duchess take her seat beside a husband who had not looked at her since the vows. The sentence was wrong, not merely awkward, altered. She had seen the original proof the night before, when Louise Mercier brought the breakfast cards to her room for approval. Pour la sûreté de la maison. For the safety of the house. One word had been changed. Safety had become silence. Dorothea laid one gloved fingertip beside the ink and felt the first cold thread of danger draw tight beneath her ribs. Across the long table, silver dishes gleamed beneath crystal. A dozen carefully chosen witnesses sat in the restrained splendor of the Mayfair house, among them Lady Agnes Wycliffe, Dorothea's widowed aunt, several senior relations of House Ashcombe, and Lady Verity Calder, whose pearl-grey gown made her look composed enough to belong in a portrait. No one spoke above the level of courtesy. This was not a celebration. It was a settlement performed with flowers. Julian Ashcombe, Duke of Rothmere, sat at Dorothea's right in formal black, broad-shouldered and motionless. The faint scar near his left temple caught the candlelight when he turned toward an elderly earl. He answered the man's congratulations with exact civility. He had shown Dorothea the same civility at the altar, nothing more. 3 months earlier, Sir Matthew Langford had died under the shadow of accusation. Julian believed Dorothea's father had carried a coded message that sent Lord Adrian Ashcombe into a fatal trap during the final months of war. No charge had ever been proved in a court. Proof had not been required for society. A ruined name travelled faster than any dispatch. Dorothea's marriage to the Duke had been arranged to quiet debts, questions, and the dangerous possibility that Sir Matthew's papers might surface in less loyal hands. Julian had accepted the marriage because it placed the remaining Langford correspondence under his roof. Dorothea had accepted because refusal would have left her younger brother exposed to creditors and her father's memory defenseless. She had not expected tenderness. She had expected law, rank, and distance. She had not expected someone inside Rothmere House to alter a warning before her first breakfast as Duchess. Julian reached for his wine. Dorothea turned the card slightly toward him. "Your Grace," this phrase was changed after I approved it. His gaze touched the card, then her face. His eyes were grey, clear, and colder than the chapel stone. "This is neither the time nor the place. That may be why someone chose it." A slight pause passed between them. Nearby conversation continued, but Lady Verity's fan stopped for half a beat. Dorothea noticed. Julian did not appear to. "The original sentence referred to the safety of the house," Dorothea said quietly. "This one refers to its silence. A copying error. No, the words are too different." "Then speak to the housekeeper." "The proof passed through your morning room." His expression changed by so little that another person might have missed it. Dorothea did not. "What are you suggesting?" "That someone wanted to know whether I would recognize the alteration." Julian set down his glass with controlled precision. "You have been Duchess for less than an hour. Danger does not observe rank before entering a room." At the far end of the table, a spoon touched porcelain. The tiny sound seemed unnaturally loud. Julian leaned closer, though his voice remained low enough for no one else to claim they had heard. "Do not turn a printer's error into theatre. Dorothea held his gaze. I am trying to prevent theatre. No, you are trying to make yourself necessary. The words struck cleanly because he intended them to. Dorothea felt heat rise beneath her skin, but she did not lower her head. I would prefer not to be necessary to a man who has already decided what I am. Julian's jaw tightened. For the first time that morning, she saw not indifference, but anger. It had been there all along, disciplined into stillness. Your father was necessary to Adrian's death. You believe that? I know what was found among my brother's papers. A message, not my father's understanding of it. He admitted carrying it. He also said he did not know it had been altered. Conveniently, after Adrian was dead. Dorothea's fingers closed around the edge of the card. She could have answered with grief. She could have told him how Sir Matthew had spent his last weeks rereading every letter in his study, searching for the moment another man's deception had entered his hands. She could have told him how her father's confidence failed before his health did. None of it would matter to Julian, while anger served him better than uncertainty. He turned slightly away from her, favoring the room rather than the woman beside him. You will have every courtesy due the Duchess of Rothmere, he said. You will have servants, income, and the freedom of my estates. You will not interfere in matters you do not understand. Dorothea looked again at the altered French. And if the matter concerns this house, then you will inform Mrs. Ellison. And if Mrs. Ellison is not the person who needs to hear it. Julian faced her fully. His next words were quiet, but they carried the finality of an order given on a battlefield. Never speak to me unless this house is in danger. Dorothea heard Lady Agnes draw a careful breath 2 seats away. Verity's fan resumed its measured motion. Around them, the wedding breakfast continued beneath the weight of what no one would acknowledge. Dorothea placed the card beside her plate. She did not plead. She did not remind Julian that she was now his wife. Then I hope, Your Grace, that when danger speaks, you recognize its voice. He looked at her for one unreadable moment. Then he rose to offer a formal toast. Dorothea stood with the others while crystal lifted beneath candlelight. Julian spoke of duty, alliance, and the honor of House Ashcombe. He did not speak her name. When the breakfast ended, he escorted her from the room with her hand resting on his sleeve, every inch the attentive Duke before witnesses. At the foot of the staircase, he bowed. Your apartments are prepared, and yours. Separate, of course. His gaze moved to the silver vinaigrette hanging from a narrow chain at her wrist. It had belonged to her mother. Its lid pierced with a delicate pattern of thyme leaves around a central flower. You carried that into the chapel. My mother carried it whenever she was anxious. Are you anxious? Dorothea touched the cool silver. I am observant. Something flickered in his expression, then vanished. Those qualities are not the same. No, one is useful. He left her there. Dorothea climbed the stairs alone. Her rooms were beautiful in the impersonal manner of spaces prepared by people who knew her rank but nothing of her. Louise waited in the dressing room, pale and worried. Your Grace, did something happen downstairs? The French card was changed. Louise's eyes widened. I copied it exactly. I swear I did. I know. Dorothea removed her gloves. Who handled the proof after you? Mr. Vale took it to the morning room, Mrs. Ellison said. The final cards came from there just before dawn. Did anyone ask about this? Dorothea lifted the vinaigrette. Louise shook her head. Only Lady Verity. Yesterday afternoon, she asked whether the grill could be removed for cleaning. Dorothea went still. Did you tell her? I said I didn't know. You did well. She dismissed Louise only after making her promise not to repeat the conversation. Then Dorothea locked the door, sat at the small writing desk, and opened the vinaigrette. The familiar scent of dried thyme and bergamot rose faintly from the sponge beneath the pierced lid. She drew one slow breath, then another. Dignity, patience, truth. The three words had steadied her through her father's illness, the announcement of the marriage, and the cold walk down the chapel aisle. She pressed the inner grille with her thumbnail. It shifted. Her mother had never told her it could move. Dorothea lifted it carefully. Beneath the silver plate lay a scrap of thin paper no larger than a fingernail. 3 letters had been pricked into it with a fine point. M.E.R. Dorothea stared at them while the house settled around her with distant footsteps and closing doors. Someone had altered the warning. Someone knew the secret of her mother's vinaigrette. Someone had placed a message in her hands before she became Duchess. Downstairs, Julian believed he had ordered his bride into silence. Dorothea folded the scrap, copied the letters onto a blank page, and hid the original beneath the lining of her traveling workbox. Then she looked toward the locked door and understood that the danger had entered Rothmere House before she had. By 10 the next morning, Dorothea had learned that Rothmere House could conceal unease beneath perfect order. Breakfast arrived precisely. Fires had been laid. Fresh water stood in the dressing room. No servant hurried, no door slammed, and no one mentioned that the new Duchess had spent her first night in rooms separated from her husband by a locked corridor and several generations of family pride. Louise entered carrying a small stack of papers against her chest. Her face was pale. "Your Grace, Mrs. Ellison says Lady Verity has called." Dorothea looked up from the copied letters M.E.R. at this hour. "She says she's come to offer assistance with the household." "How charitable." Louise did not smile. "There's something else." She set the papers on the desk. "These are the discarded proofs from yesterday. I asked the under-footman to retrieve them before they were burned." Dorothea turned the top sheet toward the window. The French sentence appeared in Louise's careful hand. "Pour la sûreté de la maison." Correct. A second proof beneath it carried the same wording, but a different hand had added a faint pencil mark beside the phrase. 3 small points, one beneath the first word, one beneath the middle, one beneath the final word. "Who saw this after you?" Dorothea asked. "Mr. Vale." He checked the names and said the packet needed to go to the morning room. "Did you take it there?" "No, he did." "And after that?" Louise hesitated. "Mrs. Ellison told me the final cards arrived from the printer before dawn." "Did anyone compare them to the approved proof?" "I was meant to." Shame entered her voice. "Lady Verity asked me to help her maid with a torn sleeve. By the time I returned, the cards had already been placed." Dorothea studied her. "You believe that was an accident?" "No, Your Grace. Neither do I." She lifted the silver vinaigrette from the desk. "Yesterday you said," Lady Verity asked whether the grill could be removed. "Tell me exactly how," she asked. Louise searched her memory. "She was in the blue withdrawing room. She said the silver looked old and asked whether the pierced plate lifted for cleaning. Then she laughed and said French women knew more about such things than English maids." "Did she touch it?" "Only for a moment. You had left it on the table while the dressmaker adjusted your sleeve." Dorothea opened the lid. The grill sat flush beneath the time pattern. How long was she alone with it? Perhaps 2 minutes, maybe less. 2 minutes could be enough to test a catch, count a pattern, or slip paper beneath a plate. Dorothea placed the copied letters beside the proof. M.E.R. The 3 points beneath the French sentence formed no obvious word, yet their spacing resembled the enlarged holes in the grill. "Bring me a pin," she said. Louise obeyed. Dorothea pressed gently against the silver plate. It shifted, then lifted. The underside showed 3 fresh scratches where a tool had caught the metal. Her mother had carried the vinaigrette for years. Dorothea knew every worn edge. These marks were new. She set the grill over the discarded French proof. Most of the pierced holes revealed meaningless fragments. 3 enlarged openings framed the beginnings of words. M from maison, E from de, R from sûreté. When the grill was turned slightly, the letters did not appear in a straight line. They had been selected. Louise stared. Someone altered it. Yes, to make the letters or to see whether I could. Dorothea lifted the grill. The changed phrase may not have been the message. It may have been a test. A knock sounded before Louise could answer. Mrs. Ellison entered and curtsied. She was a composed woman in her late 50s, with silver threaded through dark hair and the authority of someone who had served the same family long enough to distinguish rank from character. "Lady Verity is waiting in the morning drawing-room, Your Grace." "Has His Grace been informed?" "Yes." "And he has gone to Whitehall." Dorothea understood. Julian had chosen absence rather than involvement. "Then Lady Verity shall wait no longer." She gathered the proofs, slid them into the locked drawer, and handed Louise the vinaigrette. "Bring this. Stay close." The morning drawing-room faced the square and had been arranged in shades of cream that made Lady Verity's grey-blue silk seem almost luminous. She rose as Dorothea entered. "My dear Duchess." The intimacy of the address was carefully calculated. "I worried the first morning in a new house might be overwhelming. How kind of you to worry after it has already begun." Verity's smile held. "Rothmere House can be severe. Julian has never understood how much warmth a woman must create for him. You speak. From experience. From observation." Her gaze moved to the vinaigrette in Louise's hands. "And from concern. That is a lovely piece." Dorothea sat. "You admired it yesterday." "Did I?" You asked whether the grill could be removed. Verity looked amused rather than startled. "Did Miss Mercier remember that?" Louise lowered her eyes, but Dorothea saw the tension in her shoulders. "I remembered it. Of course." Verity turned back to Dorothea. "You notice a great deal." "So do you." Mrs. Ellison entered with tea. Verity accepted a cup, then allowed the silence to lengthen until it became a test of manners. "I heard there was some difficulty with the French cards," she said at last. "News travels quickly in this house. Servants become anxious when blamed for errors. No servant has been blamed. Not yet." Verity glanced toward Louise. "Though I cannot imagine why a companion would approve a phrase about silence at a wedding breakfast." Louise flushed. Dorothea set down her cup. She did not. Then perhaps she failed to notice it. She copied the correct phrase. The alteration occurred after the proof left her hands. Verity's eyes sharpened. "How fortunate you have already determined that." "Evidence is fortunate when people prefer assumption." Mrs. Ellison's mouth tightened by a fraction. Verity smiled again. "You are protective of her." "She has earned protection." "Has she?" "Loyalty can be expensive in a new household." Dorothea looked directly at her. "So can cruelty disguised as efficiency." The room went still. Louise stared at the carpet. Mrs. Ellison stood motionless beside the tea table. Verity leaned back. "You misunderstand me. Then clarify." "I only mean that Julian cannot afford disorder. Not after Adrian. Not after your father." The names entered the room like smoke. Dorothea kept her voice even. My father's name is not an invitation. It is already present in this house, because others carry it into every conversation. Julian carries it because he must. Verity lowered her voice. He trusted Adrian. He trusted Sir Matthew once. You should not be surprised that trust is now difficult for him. Difficulty is not permission to accuse without proof. No, but grief rarely waits for permission. Dorothea heard something in the answer that sounded almost personal. You knew Adrian well. Verity's fingers tightened around the handle of her cup. Everyone knew Adrian. That was not what I asked. Before Verity could reply, Louise shifted and the vinaigrette slipped slightly in her hand. Verity's gaze went to it at once. Not admiration, recognition. Dorothea noticed the speed of it. Would you like to hold it again? She asked. Verity looked back at her. Again? You handled it yesterday. Only briefly. Long enough to know the grill lifts. Any well-made vinaigrette can be opened for cleaning. Not all have removable pierced plates. Verity placed her cup down. Your mother's did. The answer came too quickly. Dorothea felt the room narrow around the words. You knew my mother's vinaigrette. A pause. I saw it at Langford House years ago. My mother died before you were presented. Verity's face changed at last, only slightly, but enough. Then I must be mistaken. Yes, Dorothea rose. The interview was over, and Verity knew it. Thank you for calling. Verity stood as well. I hope you will not make an enemy of the people who understand Julian best. Understanding a man is not the same as owning the right to interpret him. Verity's smile returned, thinner now. He once believed I was suited to this house. Dorothea held her gaze. Yet he married me. Marriage and suitability are not always companions. Neither are intimacy and entitlement. Verity gave a small curtsy and left. Mrs. Ellison waited until the door closed. Your Grace, I should inform His Grace that Lady Verity spoke of the late Duchess's possessions. My mother was never Duchess. No, forgive me. There is nothing to forgive. Dorothea looked toward the door Verity had crossed. But there is much to remember. She returned to her rooms with Louise and locked the door. Then she set the vinaigrette beside the French proof and turned the grill through several positions. One alignment revealed the same 3 letters. Another framed only empty paper. A third brought 3 tiny pinpricks into view near the bottom margin, so faint that she had missed them before. Someone had tested both the object and the page. Someone wanted to know whether the new Duchess would recognize a selecting pattern. A footman arrived with a black-edged invitation. It bore the seal of Lord Hugh Cresswell. Inside was a formal request for Dorothea and Julian to attend a diplomatic musicale at Calder House the following evening. Beneath the printed lines, one sentence had been added by hand. If your Grace wishes to know what happened on Lord Adrian's final night, bring the silver. Dorothea read it twice. Louise whispered, Will you tell the Duke? Dorothea folded the invitation. Julian had ordered her not to speak unless the house was in danger. Someone had altered his wedding table, handled her mother's vinaigrette, tested her knowledge, and summoned her by name into a mystery, tied to his dead brother. Yes, she said, but first I will decide what I am willing to tell him. Julian returned to Rothmere House shortly after dusk and found Dorothea waiting in the morning room with Hugh Cresswell's invitation unopened on the table between them. The lamps had been lit, but the curtains remained drawn back from the dark square, reflecting the room against the glass. Dorothea stood beside the mantel. She had changed from her morning dress into deep green silk, though no jewels softened the severity of her posture. The silver vinaigrette hung from her wrist. Julian noticed it at once. "Mrs. Ellison said you wished to speak to me." "The house may be in danger." His expression altered by 1 degree. "You have chosen your phrasing carefully. You chose the rule." Dorothea indicated the invitation. "Lord Hugh Cresswell has invited us to a diplomatic musicale at Calder House tomorrow evening." Julian did not touch it. "We will decline. You have not read the note." Cresswell does not send notes worth reading. He says he knows what happened on Adrian's final night. Julian's face became still. Dorothea saw grief pass through him so quickly that it might have been mistaken for irritation. What exactly did he write? "Read it." Julian broke the seal and unfolded the card. His gaze moved over the printed invitation, then stopped at the handwritten sentence. "If your grace wishes to know what happened on Lord Adrian's final night, bring the silver." He looked toward the vinaigrette. "Has anyone else seen this?" "Louise." "No one else?" "No." "Good." He crossed to the fire and held the invitation above the flame, but Dorothea caught his wrist before the paper lowered. The touch surprised them both. Julian looked at her hand on his sleeve. Dorothea released him at once. Destroying it does not destroy what he knows. It prevents him from proving he reached you. He delivered it through your front door. Cresswell prefers witnesses when they protect him and secrecy when it harms others. Julian lowered the invitation, but did not return it. "You will not attend." "Why?" "Because he intends to use you. He already has." "Then do not make it easier." Dorothea remained where she stood. "You said Hugh was the last man to speak with Adrian." Julian's gaze sharpened. "Who told you that?" "No one. You reacted before reading the note." Verity spoke of Adrian as though she had known more than society knew. "Hugh chose his final night as bait. I am asking whether the bait is true." "You are asking about matters that killed my brother and ruined my father." Julian turned away. For several seconds, the only sound was the low settling of coal in the grate. "Adrian attended a private supper after Vauxhall," he said at last. "Cresswell was there. So was Verity's father, 2 diplomatic secretaries, and a courier attached to the Foreign Office. Adrian left alone before midnight, carrying the message my father supposedly delivered, carrying a copy." "Supposedly?" Julian looked back at her. "Do not mistake one admission for surrender." "I am not asking you to surrender. I am asking you to stop treating uncertainty as proof." His jaw tightened. "Your father admitted carrying a sealed paper from London to Kent. He admitted the act, not the intention. Adrian died before he could identify who changed the contents. Then Hugh may know, or he may know exactly enough to make you believe he does." Dorothea touched the vinaigrette. "He told me to bring the silver." Lady Verity knew the grill could be removed. Someone altered the French proof to test whether I could read a selecting pattern. If we remain here, we learn nothing. Julian's eyes moved to her wrist. If we attend, Cresswell controls the room. Then do not let him control where I sit. Something flickered in Julian's expression, not amusement, recognition. You intend to go regardless. Yes, you assume marriage grants you that freedom. You said I would have the freedom of your estates and every courtesy due my rank. Calder House is not my estate. No, it is a room arranged by a woman who believes she understands you better than your wife. The words landed. Julian folded the invitation once. You will remain beside Lady Agnes. I will remain where I can hear. That is not the same thing. No, Dorothea met his gaze, but perhaps you should learn the difference. The following evening, Calder House shone with enough candlelight to make discretion look festive. Carriages lined the street. Footmen in dark livery received cloaks beneath a painted ceiling crowded with mythological figures. Music drifted from the drawing room, where diplomats, peers, and carefully chosen women moved through conversation with the precision of a formal dance. Dorothea entered on Julian's arm. His hand remained beneath her gloved fingers, steady and impersonal. Lady Agnes followed with Louise several paces behind. Verity came forward to greet them in pale silver silk. "Your Graces, how generous of you to come." Her gaze settled briefly on the vinaigrette at Dorothea's wrist. "I feared the invitation had arrived too late." "It arrived precisely when intended," Dorothea said. Verity's smile did not change. "Then everything is in order." Julian looked toward the rows of gilt chairs arranged before the musicians. Place cards rested on the front seats. Dorothea saw her own name 3 places from Julian, while Verity's card occupied the chair at his right. A retired ambassador sat at his left. Julian moved without comment. He exchanged Dorothea's card with Verity's, then drew out the chair at his right. Verity watched him do it. Surely the Duchess would prefer Lady Agnes beside her. "The Duchess will sit with me," Julian said. The firmness was quiet enough to remain polite. Dorothea took the chair. When Julian sat, Verity moved to his left with a composure that did not reach her eyes. The musicians began a Mozart quartet. Conversation softened. Dorothea noticed Julian angle his head whenever someone spoke from his right. When Verity addressed him from the left, he turned his entire shoulder toward her. The scar near his temple appeared pale beneath the candlelight. Dorothea understood at last. "Your hearing," she murmured. Julian looked at her. "What about it?" "Your left ear." His expression closed. "A cannon discharge near Salamanca. How much do you lose?" "Enough for strangers to believe I am ignoring them, and for people who know to choose the wrong side." He followed her glance toward Verity. "She has always preferred my left. That does not mean anything. It means she knows where your attention can be managed." Julian's gaze rested on Dorothea for a moment longer than courtesy required. "You noticed. You told me not to speak unless the house was in danger. You did not tell me to stop seeing." Before he could answer, Hugh Cresswell appeared at the end of their row. He was handsome in the manner of a man who had learned to make charm look effortless. His dark evening coat was cut with restraint. Nothing about him suggested danger until he smiled. "Rothmere, your Grace." He bowed. "I am relieved you accepted." Julian did not rise. "You addressed my wife privately. I addressed a question privately. You will address neither again." Hugh's gaze moved to the silver at Dorothea's wrist. "That may be difficult. Some objects retain their own correspondences." Dorothea kept her hand still. "You knew my mother's vinaigrette. I knew what it meant to someone who needed to breathe." Julian's head turned sharply. Dorothea felt the air change. "What phrase did you use?" she asked. Hugh looked at her. "Learn to breathe through silver." The words belonged to her mother. She had whispered them to Dorothea during crowded assemblies and after Sir Matthew's first illness. No stranger should have known them. "Who told you that?" Dorothea asked. "A man who discovered your father was less guilty than Rothmere required him to be." Julian stood. The movement drew several glances, though the music continued. "Enough." Hugh did not retreat. Sir Matthew carried a message he did not understand. Adrian knew that before the end. "You lie." "Do I?" Hugh's voice lowered. "Then ask why Adrian requested an escort after the route was compromised." Julian's face hardened. "You were the last man to see him alive, the last man willing to admit it." Verity's fan closed softly on Julian's left. Dorothea looked toward her and saw a printed seating proof half concealed beneath the fan. Tiny pin marks dotted the margins. Hugh followed Dorothea's gaze and smiled. Rooms speak, Your Grace. Most people simply hear the music. Julian stepped between him and Dorothea. Any further communication passes through Rothmere House. As Sir Matthew's did, Hugh asked. Julian's hand closed at his side. Dorothea touched his sleeve, not to restrain him, but to remind him that the room was watching. He looked down at her hand. This time, she did not withdraw immediately. Not here, she said. Julian heard her because she stood on his right. He gave one short nod. Hugh bowed and moved away through the guests. The quartet ended to restrained applause. Verity leaned toward Julian's left and said something too softly for him to catch. He turned, but she had already looked away. Dorothea saw Hugh pause behind Julian's shoulder as the next musicians took their places. He bent close to the Duke's damaged side, where his words could be mistaken for silence. Dorothea heard them. Ask your husband why he let Adrian carry the final message alone. Julian did not react, not visibly, yet beneath Dorothea's fingers his sleeve had gone rigid. She looked at him and understood that Hugh had not come merely to expose a secret. He had come to divide husband from wife, using the truth Julian feared most. Julian did not move until Hugh disappeared beyond the musicians, but Dorothea felt the force of his restraint beneath her hand. The room had already begun to turn toward the next performance. Chairs shifted, fans opened. A violinist tested one soft note. Society resumed because society always preferred continuity to truth. Dorothea kept her voice low. You will answer me. Julian looked at her. Not here. You said Adrian asked for an escort. I said nothing. Hugh did. And you believe him? I believe your silence. His expression hardened, but before he could reply, Louise appeared at the edge of the room without her shawl and with one side of her cap ribbon missing. Your Grace. She looked frightened enough that Dorothea rose at once. What happened? A maid told me you had sent for me through the west passage. I went, but no one was there. Then another footman said you were still in the music room. Verity turned from a nearby conversation. How strange. Perhaps the girl misunderstood. Dorothea looked at her. Which maid? Louise hesitated. I don't know her name. She wore colder colors. Julian's attention shifted toward the passage doors. You will remain with Lady Agnes. I'm not leaving Her Grace, Louise said before fear could stop her. Julian glanced at Dorothea, then remain with both. A servant approached him, carrying a sealed message on a silver tray. The seal belonged to the under-secretary. Julian broke it and read the first line. His expression changed. I must answer this now. Dorothea saw the calculation in him, one danger visible. Another implied. Go, she said. I will stay with Lady Agnes. Julian leaned closer, speaking into the space only she could hear. Do not leave this room. I understand. He looked at her long enough to make certain she did. Then he crossed toward the library with the waiting servant. Lady Agnes had been drawn into conversation with an ambassador's wife. Louise stood at Dorothea's shoulder, trying to recover her composure. Dorothea noticed the missing ribbon again. A narrow strip of blue silk lay near the conservatory doors, half hidden beneath the edge of a carpet. That is yours, she said. Louise touched her cap. Yes. Dorothea looked toward the west passage. The doors remained open. Beyond them, lamps burned along a corridor lined with palms and marble busts. No servant stood there now. Stay with Lady Agnes, Dorothea said. Louise caught her sleeve. You told His Grace you'd remain. I said I understood him. That's not the same. Dorothea almost smiled. No, it is not. She crossed the room before anyone could stop her. The conservatory passage was cooler than the music room and nearly silent beneath the glass roof. Orange trees stood in painted tubs along one wall. At the far end, a narrow antechamber opened beside the west stair. The blue ribbon lay just inside it. Dorothea bent to retrieve it. "You came more quickly than I expected." Hugh's voice came from behind her. She straightened. He stood near the doorway, leaving enough space to appear accidental and not enough to feel safe. "You used a servant's ribbon to draw me here. I returned what another person dropped. Louise did not drop it here. Then perhaps someone wished to be helpful." Dorothea placed the ribbon in her palm. People who wish to help do not hide behind passageways. Hugh stepped nearer, though he kept his hands visible. Neither do people who wish to survive. "Is that what you are doing? Always?" His smile carried no warmth now. "Your father tried survival too late." Dorothea's fingers closed around the ribbon. "You said he carried a message he did not understand." "He did. Who altered it?" A better question is why Rothmere believed the easiest answer. You are not answering. Because answers have prices. And mine? Hugh looked toward the vinaigrette at her wrist. Silver, silence, perhaps trust. You have none of those, not yet. Dorothea did not retreat when he moved within a few feet. What happened to Adrian? He discovered that confidential roots were not being sold one by one. They were being traded through shame, a debt postponed, a letter withheld, a husband spared embarrassment, a servant spared dismissal. And you arranged it. I managed consequences. You mean people. People are consequences. The calmness of the sentence revealed more than denial would have. Hugh continued. Adrian learned too much and trusted too few. He asked his brother for an escort. Rothmere refused because secrecy mattered more than safety. Why tell me? Because Julian will confess only what preserves his authority. Dorothea heard the cruelty in the precision. And you? I tell the truth when it weakens the right person. Then whatever you say is shaped by malice. Truth survives motive. He glanced toward the silver case. Your mother understood that. Dorothea's breath stopped. Do not speak of her. She kept papers Sir Matthew was too honorable to burn and too frightened to read. Adrian found one. You are lying, am I? Hugh lowered his voice. Ask why your father refused the second message. Dorothea held still. The phrase struck differently because Julian had never mentioned a second message. What second message? Hugh smiled. There, that is the question he should have allowed you to ask. Voices sounded faintly from the music room. Hugh stepped closer. Dorothea moved toward the open passage. We are finished. No, we are finally useful to one another. He reached for her hand. Dorothea withdrew it. Do not touch me. His fingers closed only around the tips of her glove, light enough to imitate courtesy. You mistake necessity for intimacy, and you mistake restraint for permission. He bowed over her hand anyway. The gesture was formal. The pressure was not. As his lips touched the glove, his thumb pressed against the lid of the vinaigrette. A sharp edge bit into Dorothea's palm, through the fabric. She pulled back. Hugh released her at once. A folded scrap had vanished beneath the silver lid. Now Rothmere will have to decide what he saw, Hugh murmured. Dorothea understood. The message was not the only purpose. The scene itself was evidence designed for another man's jealousy. You wanted him to witness this. I wanted him to reveal which matters more, your honor or his pride. You know nothing about my honor. Society does not require knowledge, only arrangement. Release her. Julian's voice came from the passage behind Hugh. Hugh turned. Julian stood at the threshold, the sealed message still in one hand. He looked first at Hugh, then at Dorothea's withdrawn hand, then at the vinaigrette. No rage distorted his face. That made the silence more dangerous. "Your Grace," Hugh said smoothly. "A misunderstanding. A lady withdrawing her hand is not difficult to understand. It was courtesy. Courtesy ends when permission does." Hugh's smile faded. Julian stepped into the room. "You will leave Calder House before I count to 10. You are not the host. No. I am the man whose wife you cornered." Hugh looked at Dorothea. "Ask him about Adrian leave," Julian said. Hugh bowed with insulting elegance. "You will soon decide which man has told you less." He passed Julian and disappeared toward the stair. Julian waited until the sound of his steps faded. Then he turned to Dorothea. His gaze dropped to her hand. "Are you hurt?" "No." "You flinched. Something caught beneath the glove." He did not reach for her. "May I see?" The question disarmed her more than command would have done. Dorothea held out her hand. Julian removed the glove carefully, touching only the fabric. A shallow red line marked her palm where the vinaigrette edge had pressed. He looked at it, then at her face. "Did he force you here?" "He used Louise's ribbon." "Did he say why?" "He said many things because he wanted at least one of them to divide us." Julian's expression tightened. "Tell me exactly." Before Dorothea could answer, Louise hurried into the passage with Lady Agnes and an older married woman, Dorothea, recognized as the wife of a senior diplomat. "Your Grace." Louise stopped when she saw the glove in Julian's hand. "I told Lady Agnes everything." Lady Agnes's gaze moved from Dorothea to Julian, then toward the empty doorway. "Did Cresswell touch you?" "He took my hand after I withdrew it." The diplomat's wife inhaled sharply. Her presence changed the scene. This was no longer a private accusation that Hugh could reverse without consequence. Julian looked toward Louise. "Who sent you through the West Passage?" "A maid in Calder livery. She said her Grace required me." "Can you identify her?" "I think so." Julian nodded to the diplomat's wife. "Lady Harcourt, will you remain with the Duchess while I speak to the butler?" Dorothea closed her bare hand around the vinaigrette. Something shifted beneath the lid. "Wait." Julian stopped. She opened the case. The scented sponge appeared untouched. Then she lifted the pierced grill. A narrow strip of paper clung beneath it. For 1 second, a row of numbers and a small embossed crescent became visible. The paper slipped deeper as the grill moved, vanishing against the silver. Julian leaned closer. "What was that?" Dorothea turned the plate once, but the strip no longer showed. "What Hugh wanted me to carry. Give it to me." She looked up. "No." Julian's face hardened. "Dorothea, you asked what happened. I am showing you." She pressed the grill back into place. "The paper is still here." Lady Agnes stepped nearer. "How can you be certain?" Dorothea closed the lid and felt the hidden thickness beneath her thumb. "Because it has not disappeared." She looked toward the passage where Hugh had gone. "It has only been hidden more cleverly." They left Calder House before the final movement ended. Julian did not offer excuses to their hosts. Lady Agnes remained at Dorothea's side while Louise travelled with them in the carriage, silent beneath the weight of what had almost happened. The silver vinaigrette rested in Dorothea's closed hand. Julian sat opposite, his gaze fixed on it rather than on her. London passed beyond the glass in streaks of lamplight and shadow. No one spoke until the carriage turned into the square before Rothmere House. "Mr. Talbot is waiting," Julian said, "and Mr. Bell." Dorothea looked at him. "You summoned them before we left Calder House." "I sent word while speaking to the butler, without asking me." His expression tightened. The paper may contain compromised correspondence. The paper is inside my property and may concern my brother's death. Then both truths exist. Lady Agnes looked between them, but did not intervene. Julian lowered his voice. I will not take the vinaigrette from you. Dorothea studied him. That is not the same as understanding why you should not. No. The carriage stopped. He waited for the footman to open the door, then stepped down and turned back. He did not offer his hand until Dorothea looked at it. She placed her gloved fingers in his. His grip was steady, careful, and gone the instant she reached the pavement. Mr. Talbot and Mr. Bell were waiting in Julian's library beneath 3 shaded lamps. Mr. Talbot stood beside a locked document case. Mr. Bell had brought a small leather roll of tools and a magnifying lens. Mrs. Ellison closed the library doors after Lady Agnes and Louise entered. Julian remained near the mantel. Dorothea crossed to the broad desk and placed the vinaigrette on the blotter. No one touches it without asking, she said. Mr. Bell bowed. Of course, Your Grace. Mr. Talbot inclined his head. Julian said nothing. Dorothea removed the chain from her wrist and opened the lid. The scented sponge lay beneath the pierced grill. She used the edge of a folded card to lift the plate. At first, nothing appeared. Then Mr. Bell angled one lamp closer. A strip of paper clung to the underside, nearly the same pale grey as the silver. Gum, he said. A thin layer along the rim. Dorothea looked at him. How recent. Recent enough to hold, not fresh enough to shine. The paper was prepared before Lord Cresswell approached you. Julian's face hardened, so the contact was planned. The transfer was planned, Dorothea said, and the kiss was arranged to be witnessed. Lady Agnes's mouth tightened, the sort of cruelty society calls ambiguity when a man benefits from it. Mr. Bell used an ivory pick to loosen one corner of the paper, but Dorothea stopped him with a raised hand. Show me how. He handed her the tool. Slide beneath the upper edge. Do not pull. The fibers will tear. Dorothea worked slowly. The strip came free no larger than 2 finger joints. A row of numbers crossed the center. Beneath them sat a small crescent pressed into the paper. No full sentence. No name, only marks. Meaningless by itself, Mr. Talbot said. That is likely the intention, Dorothea replied. She turned the silver grill over. 12 openings formed the central flower. 3 were slightly wider than the rest. Mr. Bell examined them through his lens. Those cuts are newer. They were not there when my mother used this, Dorothea said. Could they select letters? If placed over a printed page prepared for the pattern. Julian moved closer but stopped on Dorothea's right. The guest list. Dorothea looked at him. You noticed Verity's seating proof. I noticed you notice it. The acknowledgement was quiet. Louise produced the folded program she had gathered from beneath Dorothea's chair at Calder House. I thought you might need this, Your Grace. Dorothea took it. You were right. She laid the printed guest list beneath the grill. The first position revealed fragments of titles and names without sense. She moved the plate slightly downward. 3 widened holes framed M-E and R, nothing more. Meerwick, Julian said. Perhaps. Dorothea shifted the grill again. Another opening revealed west. A third alignment produced only the word third. Mr. Talbot frowned. Meerwick, west, third. Not a sentence, Dorothea said. An instruction in pieces. Julian went still. The west orangery wall at Meerwick Park has narrow glass panels set between stone supports. Adrian used the room for private meetings during the war. How many panels? Lady Agnes asked. 6. Then third may refer to the third panel. Dorothea lifted the grill, or it may refer to a bell, a date, a seat, or a person. We should not force the first answer simply because it fits. Julian's gaze rested on her. You think Merriwick may be bait. Hugh has already shown he prefers truth shaped into traps. Mr. Bell examined the lower edge of the grill. There is another detail. The openings do not form a complete pattern. This was not designed to produce whole phrases, only fragments. So the reader must already know the context, Dorothea said, or know enough to guess. Mr. Talbot opened the locked document case. Inside lay a route map, several copied memoranda, and a black ribbon packet. Julian's hand paused over the packet. Adrian altered his method during the final months of the war. He stopped trusting sealed dispatches. Dorothea looked at him. You knew he used printed pages. I knew he used ordinary objects, men as programs, invitations. I did not know about your mother's vinaigrette. Did he know her? He visited Langford House twice. Hugh said Adrian found one of her papers. Julian's expression changed. He said that to you? Yes. What else? That my father refused a second message. Silence settled across the library. Julian looked toward the fire, though no flame burned there. Sir Matthew carried one sealed note from London to Kent. Adrian believed the contents were changed before delivery. Your father later refused another request. Dorothea felt the words strike beneath her ribs. You knew that. I knew he refused. I did not know why. Yet you treated the refusal as fear after guilt. Yes, not as warning. Julian met her eyes. No, the admission did not excuse him. It made the old judgment look smaller and more deliberate. Dorothea touched the edge of the guest list. My father said the first message felt wrong after he delivered it. He began opening nothing and carrying nothing. He told me he had been made useful by men who never intended to trust him. Julian's face tightened. Adrian died before he could identify where the substitution occurred, and you chose the living man with less power to defend himself. I chose the explanation that made Adrian's death simpler. Simpler for whom? He did not answer. Mr. Talbot lowered his gaze. Mr. Bell turned his lens in one hand. Dorothea looked at Julian. You said I was trying to make myself necessary. You are necessary. The words came without warmth, but not without weight. That is not the same as being believed. No. He glanced at the grill, then back to her. Read the fragments again. You can see them. I want to hear what you see. Dorothea noticed the angle of his head. His right ear faced her. Something in the request felt smaller than apology and more honest than command. She placed the grill over the page. M.E.R. West, 3rd. Julian listened without interruption. When she finished, he said, I heard you. Dorothea lifted her eyes. That is not yet the same as believing me. I know, Mr. Talbot cleared his throat and removed another folded sheet from the case. There is one matter that may alter the question. He opened an old seating proof bearing the Rothmere crest. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Along its margin, 12 pinpricks formed the same spacing as the vinaigrette grill. Julian took the page and read the date. His face went still. This was printed at Rothmere House. 3 weeks before the wedding, Mr. Talbot said, for the dinner at which the marriage settlement was announced. Dorothea placed the grill over the old proof. The holes did not yet reveal a word, but the pattern aligned perfectly. Someone had tested the method inside Julian's house before Dorothea ever crossed its threshold as his wife. She looked toward the locked library doors. Then Hugh did not bring the conspiracy into Rothmere House. Julian followed her gaze. It was already here. The decision to leave for Merwick Park was made before midnight and disclosed to the household only as a brief country inspection. By 7 the next morning, Rothmere House had disappeared behind them, swallowed by the pale haze above London. Dorothea sat beside Lady Agnes in Julian's travelling carriage, the silver vinaigrette closed in her lap. Julian occupied the opposite seat. Mr. Talbot followed in a second carriage with the seating proofs, route maps, and Hugh's cipher slip-locked in his document case. Louise travelled with Lady Agnes's maid. No one had been told about the West panel. No one had been told that the conspiracy might already exist inside House Ashcombe. For the first hour, the only sounds were wheels over damp road and the occasional creak of leather. Lady Agnes pretended to sleep with the skill of a woman who wished to hear everything without being invited into the exchange. Dorothea watched hedgerows replace stone houses beyond the glass. Julian had angled himself so that his right ear faced her. She noticed and disliked that the small act still affected her. "You said." "Adrian stopped trusting sealed dispatches," she began. "Yes. When did he ask you for an escort?" Julian looked toward the window. 3 days before he died. Before or after my father refused the second message?" "After." "Then Sir Matthew's refusal should have confirmed the route was unsafe." "It should have." Dorothea waited. Julian's silence no longer intimidated her. It simply marked the place where truth had not yet been spoken. "What reason did Adrian give?" she asked. "He said the rooms were changing around him." Invitations arrived with names moved. Servants delivered messages they denied carrying. Men repeated phrases from letters that had never left locked desks. "And you still sent him alone?" Julian's jaw tightened. "I believed an escort would expose him." "Did he agree?" "At first. That is not what I asked." Lady Agnes opened one eye, then closed it again. Julian looked at Dorothea. No, he did not agree. The admission sat heavily between them. What did he say? That secrecy had ceased to be protection if only one man understood the plan. Dorothea felt the words strike with painful familiarity. He was right. "Yes. You did not think so then?" "No." Julian did not soften the answer with explanation. "An under-secretary had warned me that one of the social routes might be compromised. I believed the warning referred to a specific courier, not the method. Because that was the more convenient reading. Because I thought I knew the boundaries of the danger. And people paid for that certainty." His gaze moved to the vinaigrette. "Adrian did. My father did too." "Yes." Dorothea looked down at the silver case. "Sir Matthew stopped leaving the house after the accusations spread. Men who had once asked him to dine crossed streets to avoid him. He began sealing his own letters, then stopped writing, because he no longer trusted the hands that carried them." Julian's face changed. She had never described her father's final months to him. "I did not know." "You did not ask?" "No." The carriage passed beneath a stand of elms. Light shifted across Julian's face, revealing fatigue beneath the control. "I thought grief gave me the right to certainty," he said. "It did not." Dorothea did not absolve him. "What was in the warning you ignored?" Only that ordinary social papers had begun producing repeated references. Music programs, dinner cards, subscription lists. Nothing that could be traced to a government office. No name, one initial. Which? Cece. Dorothea thought of Calder, Cresswell, and the silk thread marked with the same initial they had not yet found. That narrows nothing. It narrowed enough that I should have stopped Adrian. "Why did you not?" Julian answered after a long pause. "Because he was my younger brother, and I mistook his courage for consent." Lady Agnes opened both eyes this time. Dorothea felt the pain beneath the words, but she refused to let pain erase choice. Do not mistake remorse for repair. Julian met her gaze. "I will not." They reached Merwick Park shortly after noon. The estate rose beyond a long avenue of beech trees, its pale stone front softened by ivy and weather. Servants assembled beneath the portico, surprised by the Duke's sudden arrival, and more surprised when Julian presented Dorothea with full household authority. The Duchess is to have access to all rooms, records, and keys, he told Mrs. Pelling, the elderly housekeeper. No permission beyond hers is required. Mrs. Pelling curtsied. Yes, Your Grace. Dorothea looked at Julian. The declaration was practical, not tender, but it gave her something he had denied at Rothmere House, not courtesy, authority. After a brief meal, they crossed the south lawn to the old orangery. The glass structure stood apart from the main house behind a low wall of overgrown laurel. Dust silvered the panes. Several citrus trees survived in large tubs, their leaves dark against the white stone. Mrs. Pelling unlocked the outer door. Lord Adrian used this room often during the war, she said. He preferred it because no servant could approach without being seen through the glass. Unless the servant came through the west passage, Dorothea said. Mrs. Pelling looked startled. There is a narrow service door behind the heating chamber. Julian turned toward her. Who knew? The gardeners? The housekeeper, Lord Adrian. She hesitated. Lady Verity knew. She visited him here more than once. Dorothea felt Julian go still beside her. When? He asked. During the spring before his death. She said they discussed music for a charity concert. Did you believe her? Mrs. Pelling lowered her eyes. At the time. They counted the stone supports along the west wall. The third stood beneath a cracked pane and an iron ventilation latch. Dorothea held the copied guest list in one hand and the vinaigrette grill in the other. Myrrh, west, third. The fragments did not command certainty, but the fit was strong enough to test. Julian crouched beside the stonework. There is a seam. Do not press it yet, Dorothea said. He looked up. Why? Because the message came through Hugh. He may expect the compartment to be opened carelessly. Julian rose without argument. Mr. Talbot examined the latch. 12 small openings formed a floral shape. The same spacing, he said. Dorothea placed the grill over the iron. 3 enlarged holes aligned with 3 recessed pins. Mr. Bell had explained the pattern once. She needed no second lesson. She pressed the first pin, then the second. The third resisted. Julian held out the ivory tool. May I? Hand it to me. He did. Dorothea pressed the final pin. A quiet click sounded behind the wall. One stone shifted outward by less than an inch. Julian and Mr. Talbot drew it free. Behind it lay a shallow compartment lined with faded green felt. It was empty. Dust covered most of the base, except for a clean rectangular outline, approximately 14 inches long. Something had rested there until recently. A black silk thread clung to one corner. Dorothea lifted it carefully. Near the frayed end, a tiny woven letter appeared. See, a portfolio, Mr. Talbot said. Or a music case, Dorothea replied. Mrs. Pelling drew in a breath. Lady Verity asked for old music after Lord Adrian died. Everyone turned toward her. How soon after? Julian asked. 10 days, perhaps 12. She came with her maid. She said Lord Adrian had borrowed several Calder scores and that her father wished them returned. Did she enter the orangery? Yes, Mrs. Pelling's voice weakened. She knew exactly which wall to approach. What did she carry out? Dorothea asked. A black folio with a silver crescent at the clasp. Julian closed his eyes for one moment. When he opened them, grief had become concentration. Did anyone accompany her? Only the maid. Not Cresswell? No, Your Grace. Dorothea looked at the empty compartment. Verity had not merely known the cipher method. She had known where Adrian hid what he feared to keep inside the house. "Why did no one tell you?" Dorothea asked Julian. "Because no one believed a music folio mattered," Mrs. Pelling answered before he could. "And because Lady Verity was trusted." The final word hung in the stale air. Julian looked toward the glass roof, where sunlight broke into pale squares across the floor. "What did Adrian call the portfolio?" "He never named it to me," Mrs. Pelling said, "but once I heard him tell his valet that music was the safest place to hide mourning." Mr. Talbot wrote the phrase down. Dorothea examined the felt lining. Near the back edge, beneath the dust, a faint impression remained from a second object, much smaller than the portfolio. She touched it with one finger. Something else was here. Julian leaned closer. A letter packet? Perhaps. She looked at the black thread again, or the key to reading the portfolio. A footman appeared at the orangery entrance, carrying an express packet. "For His Grace." From Whitehall. Julian broke the seal. His expression changed as he read. A confidential packet disappeared after the Calder Musicale. Mr. Talbot stepped nearer. Which packet? Coastal correspondence routes. 3 numbered references. Dorothea opened Hugh's recovered slip from Mr. Talbot's case and compared the copied figures. Only one sequence matched. The others were wrong. "This is not the stolen route," she said. "It is meant to resemble it." Julian read the numbers again. A false trail. "Placed in my vinaigrette after Hugh arranged for you to witness him touch me." The meaning became clear. Hugh had designed evidence that could accuse her without surviving careful examination. Julian looked at the empty compartment. Then the portfolio may prove who created the substitution. If Verity still has it, or if she ever kept it. Dorothea turned toward Mrs. Pelling. Did Lady Verity leave directly after taking the folio? No. She remained in the orangery alone for several minutes. Did she write anything? I do not know. Mrs. Pelling hesitated, but the next morning, the inside of the west pane had been marked. She pointed toward the cracked glass above the compartment. Against the lower corner, almost invisible beneath dust, someone had scratched 3 short lines and 1 crescent. Dorothea raised the vinaigrette grill to the light. The marks did not align with its original time pattern. They aligned with the altered holes. Verity had not only taken Adrian's evidence, she had tested the same cipher system Dorothea now carried. Julian looked at her. "We return to London tonight." "No," Dorothea said. "We search the household records first. The packet is already missing, and someone wants us to hurry toward the accusation prepared for us." She held up the false numbers. "Hugh has shaped the trail." Verity removed the portfolio. "If we run back now, we enter the room they have arranged." Julian's instinct to command appeared in his posture. Then he stopped. "What do you propose?" Dorothea looked once more at the empty green felt, the black thread, and the crescent cut into glass. "We find out who visited after Verity." Mrs. Pelling went pale. Dorothea saw the answer before the woman spoke. "There was someone," she said. "The following evening, Lord Hugh Cresswell came to Merriwick and asked for a walking stick he claimed Lord Adrian had borrowed. They returned to London before noon the following day, carrying no portfolio and no proof strong enough to stop the accusation already moving toward Dorothea. Mrs. Pelling's records confirmed that Hugh had visited Merriwick the evening after Verity removed the black folio. He had entered the orangery alone and left without the walking stick he claimed to seek. The household book contained his signature. It proved access, not theft. By the time Rothmere House came into view, Julian had received 2 messages from Whitehall and one from Verity. The first requested a private supper that evening to discuss the missing correspondence. The second named the limited guests. The third, written in Verity's hand beneath a formal apology for the short notice, said only that discretion would protect everyone. Dorothea read the line once and handed it back. Discretion for whom? Julian folded the note. That depends on what she intends to place in the room. She will place me. I can refuse the supper. Then Hugh controls the story before we enter it. You are not obliged to defend yourself against an accusation no one has yet made. Dorothea looked through the carriage window at the gates opening before them. An accusation does not become less dangerous because polite people wait to pronounce it. Julian's gaze shifted to the silver vinaigrette at her wrist. You will not carry that tonight. I will, Dorothea. Hugh expects it. Verity expects it. If I hide it, they will claim I feared examination. There will be no examination. You cannot promise what another person will demand. I can promise what occurs in my house. You could not promise what occurred in my suite. The words struck. Julian did not answer before the carriage stopped. Dorothea stepped down without taking his hand. The supper began at 8 in the smaller dining room, where intimacy could be mistaken for trust. There were only 9 guests. The under-secretary sat near the fire with his wife. Lady Agnes occupied the chair beside Dorothea. Mr. Talbot stood discreetly behind Julian's place, present as a legal adviser rather than a guest. Verity wore dark blue silk and the expression of a woman prepared to regret whatever happened. Hugh arrived last. He bowed to Dorothea without approaching her hand. Your Grace, Lord Cresswell. Julian seated Dorothea at his right. Verity noticed and took the chair at his left without comment. The meal began with soup and strained conversation. The under-secretary spoke of coastal schedules. His wife asked Lady Agnes about Merriwick. Hugh discussed nothing of consequence. That was how Dorothea knew the danger had already been prepared. Verity waited until the servants withdrew after the second course. Then she set down her fork. I fear we cannot continue pretending this is an ordinary supper. The under-secretary's expression cooled. No one invited pretense, Lady Verity. Then I will speak plainly. She looked toward Dorothea. A confidential route reference disappeared after the musicale at Calder House. A matching figure was later reported on a slip concealed in a lady's personal silver. Julian's hand stilled beside his glass. Reported by whom? A servant who saw the object opened. Name the servant. Verity hesitated. The point is not the witness. The point is always the witness, Dorothea said. Verity turned to her. Then perhaps your Grace can remove doubt more simply. The room went silent. Hugh leaned back, watching. Dorothea felt Lady Agnes's anger beside her like contained heat. What do you propose? Dorothea asked. Nothing improper, only that the object be opened before those already present. Julian's voice hardened. No. Verity looked wounded. Surely the Duchess's innocence requires no protection from inspection. Her dignity requires protection from coercion. Coercion? Hugh said mildly. No one has threatened her. Dorothea looked at him. You arranged for my companion to be lured away. You took my hand after I withdrew it. You used the gesture to hide a paper in my vinaigrette while ensuring my husband could see enough to misunderstand. Threat is not always spoken. The under-secretary's wife looked sharply at Hugh. Verity's face lost color for one instant. That is a serious allegation. It is an exact account. Why was it not reported? It was reported to my husband immediately. Julian turned slightly, his right ear toward Dorothea. I witnessed Lord Cresswell holding her hand after she withdrew it. Hugh gave a restrained sigh. A courtesy misread under strain. Courtesy ends when a woman says no, Julian said. The words fell with such calm force that no one attempted to soften them. Verity recovered first, then opening the vinaigrette would protect the Duchess from any further insinuation. Dorothea understood the trap. Refuse, and suspicion would attach itself to silence. Consent, and whatever had been planted would be given legitimacy. Julian looked at her. You do not have to do this. No, Dorothea said. I choose to. She unfastened the chain from her wrist and placed the silver case on the table. But not because Lady Verity has the right to ask. She turned to the under-secretary. I open it before named witnesses because my father's honour and mine have already been used as convenient answers. Mr. Talbot moved closer. Lady Agnes remained seated, her gaze fixed on Verity. Julian did not touch the object. Dorothea opened the lid herself. The scented sponge appeared first. Then she lifted the pierced grill. For one suspended second, there was nothing beneath it. Relief entered the room too early. A narrow strip of paper adhered to the underside of the silver. Different numbers crossed it. The same crescent marked the corner. The under-secretary rose. Hugh looked disappointed with professional elegance. Verity lowered her eyes. How unfortunate, she murmured. Dorothea felt the room change around her. Not into certainty, into permission. Every person present had now been given a socially acceptable reason to doubt her. Mr. Talbot reached for the slip, then stopped. Your Grace. Dorothea removed it herself and placed it on a clean plate. You may examine it. He compared the figures with a copied list from Whitehall. One sequence resembles the missing reference. Resembles? Dorothea asked. It is not exact. The under-secretary took the paper. Two numbers differ. Hugh shrugged. Copies often contain errors. So do forgeries, Dorothea said. Verity looked at her. You imply someone entered your rooms. Someone already altered a French proof that passed through Rothmere's morning room. That is unrelated. Is it? Dorothea lifted the vinaigrette. You knew the grill could be removed before I did. You knew this object had been used at Calder House. You knew enough to suggest it should be opened tonight. London observes. London did not stand in the conservatory passage. Verity's fan remained closed in her lap. Dorothea continued. Only 4 people knew Lord Cresswell placed a slip inside this case. Lord Cresswell, my husband, Lady Agnes, and me. A servant might have overheard. Which servant? Verity said nothing. Dorothea leaned forward slightly. You did not ask whether the object was mine. You did not ask whether silver could conceal paper. You named the method before anyone explained it. The under-secretary looked toward Verity. Hugh intervened. The Duchess mistakes inference for confession. Then let us be precise. You kissed my hand to transfer the first slip. Lady Verity knew to target the same object a second time. Either you told her, or she already knew the plan. Verity's composure cracked by one breath. You make everything sound deliberate. Because it was. Julian rose. The supper is over. The under-secretary remained standing. Not yet. He held the slip toward the lamp. This paper may be false, but it was placed inside the Duchess's private rooms. That concerns this household and my office. Julian's face became unreadable. Dorothea saw it then. Not surprise. Calculation. A cold understanding entered her slowly. He had expected another placement. You knew, she said. Julian looked at her. Dorothea, you knew they might try again. No one else moved. Julian answered because silence would have confirmed more. I suspected Cresswell would attempt to repeat the method. And the vinaigrette. It was returned to your suite under observation. Whose observation? A footman in the west corridor and one of Talbot's clerks near the service stairs. Neither watched the drawer. No, Dorothea felt humiliation burn colder than anger. You let the object remain accessible. I intended to identify the route into your rooms by allowing evidence to be planted on me. I intended to stop the accusation before it became public. Dorothea looked around the small table, the under-secretary, his wife, Verity Hugh, Lady Agnes, Mr. Talbot. Witnesses enough for scandal to travel while still calling itself private. You failed before anyone saw the paper. Julian's jaw tightened. I believed I could contain the harm. You believed the harm belonged to you because the plan did. He took one step toward her. She stood before he could come closer. Dorothea, listen to me. I listened when you told me never to speak. I listened when you refused Adrian an escort. I listened while you decided my father's guilt was useful because uncertainty was painful. Her voice did not rise. That made every word carry farther. Tonight you used me as Adrian was used. Alone inside a plan I was not permitted to understand. Julian went still. The truth reached him before defense could. Dorothea fastened the vinaigrette at her wrist. You used my silence once, she said. Do not use my innocence next. Lady Agnes rose and came to her side. No one blocked the door. Dorothea walked from the dining room without waiting for Julian's permission, leaving behind the false slip, the unfinished suppers, and a husband who had finally learned that protection without consent could become another form of betrayal. Dorothea did not return to the supper room. She crossed the entrance hall with Lady Agnes at her side and climbed the main staircase while the voices below remained trapped behind closed doors. Louise waited outside the Duchess's apartments, pale with worry. Dorothea handed her the silver vinaigrette before entering. Keep this with you until I ask for it. Louise took it carefully. Your Grace, are you hurt? Not in any way that requires a physician. Lady Agnes closed the door behind them. The rooms had been prepared for a bride who was expected to settle into beauty and obedience. Fresh flowers stood in porcelain bowls. A fire burned low beneath the marble mantel. The adjoining door to Julian's apartments remained locked, as it had since the wedding. Dorothea looked around and understood that remaining there would make every object feel like something granted by a man who believed protection entitled him to secrecy. Louise, bring the traveling trunks. The young woman stared. Tonight, tonight. Lady Agnes lowered herself into a chair. Where will you go? The East Suite. It has not been used since Julian's grandmother died. Then it will have the advantage of containing no expectations. Louise went at once. Dorothea opened the top drawer of the writing desk and removed 3 things. Her father's final letters, the unfinished wedding toast she had never been permitted to read. The copied letters M.E.R. Everything else could be carried later. She stood before the wardrobe and selected only enough gowns for several days. No dramatic flight, no performance for servants. She was not leaving Rothmere House. She was changing the terms under which she remained. Louise returned with 2 footmen and a pair of trunks. Dorothea directed them quietly. Her father's papers went into the first trunk, her clothing into the second. The vinaigrette remained in Louise's hands. By the time Julian knocked, the room had already begun to look less like a duchess's bridal suite and more like a space being surrendered. Who is it? Lady Agnes asked. Rothmere. Dorothea folded one of Sir Matthew's letters and placed it inside the trunk. He may enter. The door remains open. Julian stepped across the threshold and stopped when he saw the servants carrying out her belongings. His gaze moved from the trunks to the empty section of wardrobe, then to Dorothea. He had removed his formal coat, but he still wore the expression of a man accustomed to entering a room and finding his authority waiting for him. Tonight it was not. Where are you going? The East Suite. Why? Lady Agnes gave a short, humorless breath. Dorothea looked directly at Julian. Because I will not sleep in rooms you use as part of an investigation. His face tightened. I did not use these rooms. You allowed my private drawer to become access. Under observation? Not. Under my knowledge. Julian looked toward the open door, where one of the footmen waited with a trunk. Dismiss the servants? No. The answer stopped him. They are carrying lawful instructions from the Duchess of Rothmere. They will not be made to believe they have entered a quarrel by mistake. Julian's jaw set, then loosened. Very well. The footman lifted the trunk and left. Louise followed with the vinaigrette. Dorothea held out her hand. The young woman returned it, then remained near Lady Agnes. Julian did not ask them to leave. Tell me the entire plan, Dorothea said. Now. He stood 6 feet from her. After Calder House, I believed Cresswell would repeat the transfer. The first slip gave him no advantage unless a second appeared where witnesses could connect it to the missing correspondence. So you returned the object to my suite? Yes. Who knew, Mr. Talbot? 1 clerk, 2 footmen. Mrs. Ellison knew only that the corridor was to be watched. Did Mr. Vale know? Julian paused. He knew the drawer held personal effects. That is not what I asked. He knew the vinaigrette had been returned. Dorothea felt anger settle into clarity. And you did not remove his access. I wanted to see whether he used it. Through me. Through the object. The object was mine. The accusation was mine. The humiliation was mine. I intended to intervene before it reached that point. Intent did not stand beside me at the table. Julian took 1 step forward, then stopped himself. I was wrong. You were more than wrong. You repeated the same choice. He looked at her. What choice? Adrian told you the rooms were changing around him. He asked for an escort because he no longer understood the whole plan. You denied him the truth and called it safety. Julian went still. Dorothea continued. Tonight you placed me inside a plan I did not understand because you believed your control would protect me. I did not see the likeness. That is the problem. You did not believe you needed my eyes. The words reached him. Dorothea saw it in the loss of defense from his face. For several seconds, he looked not like a duke being challenged, but a man forced to recognize that grief had become a habit he inflicted on others. You are right, he said. The admission did not satisfy her. It only removed one obstacle. I will no longer participate in any inquiry arranged without my consent. Cresswell has already made you central. Then I will decide how I stand there. What do you require? The question was different from command, but Dorothea did not reward it with softness. Written terms. Julian nodded once. State them. No evidence involving my name, rooms, servants, or belongings will be moved without a record and 2 witnesses. No meeting will be arranged in my name without my approval. No servant will be asked to mislead another servant for strategic convenience. No accusation against me will be allowed to continue because you believe it may expose someone else. Agreed. You have not heard everything. He waited. You will not conceal acts you call protection. If my brother's debts are threatened, if my father's papers are examined, if my household is watched, you will tell me. Julian's expression changed. Your brother's debts. Dorothea saw the answer before he spoke. What have you done? Cresswell purchased several of his gaming notes. I arranged for Talbot to discharge them before Cresswell could use them. Without telling me? Yes, because you believed payment without obligation made secrecy harmless. He looked down briefly. Yes, you denied me the choice to confront my brother. I removed a weapon and kept the decision. Julian drew a slow breath. I should have told you. You should have asked. Yes, the speed of his agreement irritated her because it sounded almost like obedience learned too late. Do not agree because you want this conversation to end. His gaze lifted. I agree because I have no defense that does not repeat the offense. That answer was honest enough to hurt. Dorothea placed the vinaigrette on the desk. The East Suite will remain mine. The connecting doors will be locked from both sides. Lady Agnes will remain as my companion until I decide otherwise. Pain crossed his face, brief and unmistakable. If that is what you choose. It is. And the vinaigrette stays with me. The grill may be evidence. So may I. Neither will be removed without permission. Julian accepted the rebuke. Talbot will examine it only when you consent. Dorothea looked toward Louise. Bring paper. Louise hurried to the desk. Dorothea dictated the terms while Julian remained standing. He did not interrupt. When she finished, she signed the page and pushed it toward him. Julian read every line. Then he signed beneath her name. You will have a copy, he said. I will have the original. Agreed. Dorothea almost told him again not to agree so easily. Then she saw the restraint in his posture. He was not surrendering because the terms were easy. He was surrendering because he finally understood that refusal would prove her right. There is one more matter, he said. No. The single word stopped him. Dorothea held his gaze. You have spoken enough for one night. Julian remained there for a moment. I am sorry for the plan failing, for believing I had the right to make it. Dorothea looked away before the sincerity could weaken her judgment. Do not make sorrow another private truth you expect me to trust. He bowed, not deeply, not theatrically. The gesture carried acknowledgement rather than defeat. Then he left. The door remained open until his footsteps faded. Only after the footman moved the final trunk did Dorothea enter the East Suite. Dust sheets had been removed in haste. The room smelled faintly of lavender and cold stone. Louise lit the lamps. Lady Agnes inspected the locks herself. Dorothea placed the vinaigrette on the writing table and opened it. The second slip from the supper had been returned to her after Mr. Talbot copied the figures. Julian believed it contained only false numbers. Dorothea had noticed something else. Along the lower edge, beneath the crescent, 3 faint marks appeared when held against the light. She took the earlier colder seating proof from her trunk and laid the grill over it. The first position showed nothing. The second revealed north. A third shift produced third. On the final alignment, 3 letters appeared through separate holes. L-I-S. Dorothea moved the grill 1 fraction farther. T. Lady Agnes leaned over her shoulder. North, third. List. Not a complete instruction, Dorothea said, but enough to ask where a third bell clears a north passage. Louise went pale. At Calder House, the 3rd morning bell sends the upper footman toward the south gallery. Dorothea looked at her. How do you know? The maid who misdirected me said I had mistaken the 2nd bell for the 3rd. I hadn't heard any bell. Dorothea turned back to the paper. Someone had already rehearsed the language used to move servants. What lies near the north passage? Lady Agnes asked. A cabinet room, Louise said. Lady Verity keeps music portfolios there. The black folio. Dorothea rested her fingers on the grill. Julian had withheld truth because he believed control belonged to him. Now she held information he did not possess. The similarity unsettled her. Yet trust could not be restored by surrendering every advantage to the man who had just used her. She folded the second slip and placed it beneath her father's letters. "Will you tell His Grace?" Louise asked. Dorothea looked toward the locked door between the suites. Not yet. Outside, a servant carried the last trunk down the corridor. Inside, the Duchess of Rothmere sat in a room she had chosen, holding a clue no husband, duke or villain knew she had understood. The missing page had been torn from Mr. Bell's ledger less than 6 hours before Dorothea arrived at his shop. Its absence showed as a raw strip along the binding, pale against older paper, and Mr. Bell stood over it with the expression of a man who had discovered a stranger inside his locked room. Lady Agnes closed the door to the back office. Louise remained near the window. Mr. Talbot placed his document case on the work table, but did not open it. Dorothea looked at the damaged ledger. "Who knew we were coming?" "No one from this shop," Mr. Bell said. "Your message arrived at 9. I opened the ledger at past and found this. When did you last see the page?" "Yesterday evening." "What did it contain?" "Orders for pierced silver inserts, small hinges, scent cases, and 2 grill replacements." His gaze moved to the vinaigrette at Dorothea's wrist. One entry matched the 12-opening floral pattern we discussed. "Under whose name?" "Harrow." "A valet." Mr. Talbot's expression sharpened. "Lord Hugh Cresswell employs a valet named Samuel Harrow." Mr. Bell nodded reluctantly. "I remember because the man paid in notes from a creditor's house rather than in coin." "Which creditor?" Dorothea asked. "Marlowe and Finch, Mr." Talbot opened his case and removed a narrow packet of financial memoranda. "They hold several of Cresswell's private obligations." Mr. Bell looked toward the front of the shop, where customers murmured beyond the partition. "Your Grace, I serve families who expect discretion. If I am seen giving household orders to a solicitor, I may lose more than one patron." "Then do not give us names you cannot prove," Dorothea said. "Show us what remains." Mr. Bell studied her. "The page is gone. Pressure remains when a man writes hard enough." She turned the next leaf at an angle beneath the window. Faint grooves crossed the paper. "Do you have graphite?" Mr. Bell hesitated, then opened a drawer and handed her a soft pencil. Dorothea rubbed the side of the lead lightly across the sheet. Indentations emerged in broken lines. Harrow. Floral insert. 12 openings. Crescent border. A second line showed the payment entry. M&F creditor account. Beneath it stood a collection notation in another hand. C. Vale. Louise drew in a breath. Clara Vale. Lady Verity's senior maid, or another person using her name, Dorothea said. "We do not accuse without more." Mr. Bell adjusted his spectacles. The piece was collected by a woman in Calder livery. She gave no first name. "When?" 6 weeks ago. "Before the wedding," Lady Agnes said. The timing widened the plan. Hugh had commissioned the duplicate grill. Before Dorothea entered Rothmere House. Before the altered French card. Before the conservatory passage. The hand kiss had not created the mechanism. It had activated one prepared in advance. Dorothea placed her own grill on the table. Was the duplicate exact? No. Mr. Bell leaned closer. The order requested laurel shaped to resemble time. The central openings differed by less than 1/8 of an inch. Enough to select different letters from the same page. Yes, so one printed card could carry 2 messages. Mr. Talbot looked at the impression again. One for the person holding the original, one for the person holding the duplicate. Dorothea thought of Verity controlling seating proofs and Hugh controlling access through debt. Whoever arranged the room could direct 2 readers without either knowing the other's instruction. Mr. Bell closed the ledger. That is all I can confirm. Not quite. Dorothea touched the torn edge. Who entered this room after closing? He stiffened. No one. Then the page removed itself. My apprentice has a key. Where is he? Sent to deliver samples near Grosvenor Square. By whom? A note arrived from a regular client. Which client? Mr. Bell went to a tray near the door and lifted a folded request. The seal had been cut away. Calder House. Lady Agnes gave a low sound of disgust. They sent the boy out and used his key. Mr. Bell looked shaken. He is 17. Then he was not the target, Dorothea said. Only the opening. A bell rang in the front shop. Footsteps approached, then stopped outside the partition. Mr. Bell's assistant announced a messenger for the Duchess of Rothmere. Mr. Talbot moved first, but Dorothea raised a hand. Let him enter. A liveried boy came in carrying an unsealed note. No answer required, Your Grace. He placed it on the table and withdrew. The handwriting was unknown. The message was not. Return the original grill, or Mr. Langford's gaming debts will be placed before every creditor in London before the Calder breakfast. Lady Agnes swore softly. Louise looked at Dorothea. Your brother? Yes. Dorothea read the threat again. Hugh believed money could still compel her. He did not know Julian had already discharged the notes. That ignorance was useful. It was also another reminder that Julian had made the decision without her. Mr. Talbot folded his hands. His Grace intended to tell you. Dorothea looked at him. He intended many things after acting. The notes were purchased through my client account. They cannot be revived by Cresswell. Then Hugh is threatening me with a weapon he no longer owns. Correct. Does he know that? No. Dorothea placed the note beside the ledger impression. Good. Mr. Bell looked between them. Your Grace, what will you do? Let him believe I am afraid. She turned to Mr. Talbot. I need the history of Hugh Cresswell's debts, not gossip. Dates, creditors, extensions, and any household suddenly spared scandal after payment changed hands. Mr. Talbot nodded. I have already begun. Because Julian instructed you. Because the pattern became clear after Merriwick. Dorothea accepted the distinction. They returned to Rothmere House shortly after noon. Julian did not wait in the entrance hall. A message informed Dorothea that he would remain in the library unless she requested his presence. She disliked how much the restraint mattered. In the east drawing room, Mr. Talbot opened a second packet. Lord Cresswell inherited debts large enough to consume his estate income for years, yet several creditors repeatedly postponed collection. In exchange for what? Lady Agnes asked. Access letters, introductions, silence. He laid out 3 examples. A merchant's son entered a diplomatic office after Hugh obtained private correspondence from the man's patron. A widow's letters disappeared after she persuaded her brother to refinance one of Hugh's notes. A junior secretary kept his post after passing copies of seating lists. He turned secrets into credit, Dorothea said. And credit into survival, Mr. Talbot replied. Adrian's investigation threatened the structure. If the list became public, Hugh would lose both money and leverage. Then the black portfolio was not merely evidence, Dorothea said. It was his entire fortune written in names. Louise brought the Calder seating proofs from the desk. Dorothea placed the original time grill over the first. Fragmentary letters appeared. North, third, list. She then used Mr. Bell's tracing of the Laurel duplicate. Different fragments emerged. Move, music, Calder. Lady Agnes leaned closer. 2 readers. 2 instructions, Dorothea said. Verity moves the room. Hugh gathers the names. Mr. Talbot studied the pages. The breakfast may be intended as a transfer or a destruction. A footman entered with a sealed packet from Julian. Dorothea opened it. Inside were copies of her brother's discharged notes, the intermediary record, and one page in Julian's hand. I should have told you before I acted. The debt is gone. The choice I took from you is not. No request followed, no defense. Dorothea read the sentence twice, then set it aside. Lady Agnes watched her but said nothing. Another paper slipped from the packet. It was a copy of Adrian's last memorandum. Near the bottom, one line had been underlined. Cresswell never carries the list. The lady does, Louise whispered. Lady Verity. Perhaps, Dorothea said. Or a woman beneath her who has been made useful. She would not condemn Clara Vale because her name appeared on a collection line, not when men had once condemned Sir Matthew with less. Mr. Talbot closed the financial packet. The Calder breakfast is in 3 days. Dorothea looked at Hugh's threat, the 2 grill patterns, and the incomplete instructions. Then we have 3 days to learn which woman carries the list. Will you tell His Grace what you found? Louise asked. Dorothea glanced toward the corridor leading to the library. Julian had withheld truth to preserve control. She had withheld the second slip to preserve herself. The resemblance no longer felt like protection. It felt like a warning. Yes, she said, but he will hear it under the terms he signed. Before she could send for him, a second note arrived without seal or signature. It contained only 5 words. She still has the original. Dorothea turned the page over. Nothing else was written. Hugh believed Dorothea possessed the wrong grill. Someone else believed Verity held the real one. For the first time, the villains were not merely hiding the truth from Dorothea. They were hiding it from one another. Dorothea received Julian in the east drawing room under the terms he had signed. Lady Agnes sat near the fire. Mr. Talbot stood beside the writing table with the stationer's impressions and Hugh's threat arranged in order. Louise remained by the open door. Julian entered alone, stopped several feet from Dorothea, and waited for her to indicate the chair on her right. He took it without comment. The duplicate grill was ordered 6 weeks ago, Dorothea said. Hugh's valet used a creditor account. A woman in Calder livery collected it under the name C. Vale. Julian's attention sharpened. Clara Vale. Perhaps. The ledger page was torn out before we arrived. Who had access? Mr. Bell's apprentice. Someone sent him away with a false Calder delivery. Mr. Talbot placed the pressure impression before Julian. The entry is clear enough to establish the order, but not enough to prove who collected it. Julian read it. Mr. Vale is Clara's brother, which gives us a connection, Dorothea said. Not guilt. Agreed. The word came too quickly. Dorothea watched him. He noticed. You believe I am saying what you want to hear. I believe you have learned the language of agreement faster than the habit behind it. Julian accepted the rebuke. Then tell me what else you found. She showed him Hugh's financial pattern, Adrian's memorandum, and the anonymous line stating that Verity still had the original. Julian read Adrian's sentence twice. Cresswell never carries the list. The lady does. Verity, he said, or Clara, or another woman compelled by one of them. You think Clara may be coerced. I think men have already used uncertainty to condemn my father. I will not repeat it, because the suspect is a servant. Julian looked at her with grave attention. What do you propose? We speak to Clara before Hugh or Verity realizes the ledger impression survived. A commotion sounded in the corridor before Julian could answer. A maid hurried past the open door. Louise stepped out. then returned at once. Your Grace, Clara Vale is leaving by the kitchen entrance. She has a trunk. Julian rose. Dorothea did the same. No one is to stop her by force. If she carries evidence, then we ask. We do not seize. Julian paused. Old instinct and new discipline crossed his face. Very well. They found Clara beneath the covered passage behind the service court. A small trunk stood beside her. She wore a plain travelling cloak over colder livery, and fear had stripped every trace of polish from her expression. 2 footmen waited at a distance under Mrs. Ellison's supervision. No one touched her. Dorothea approached first. Miss Vale. Clara's hand tightened around the trunk handle. Your Grace, I've done nothing against this house. Then tell me why you are leaving it. I was never employed here, no, but your brother is. Clara looked toward Julian. Has Mr. Vale been dismissed? No, Julian said. Not yet. Then I've nothing to say. Dorothea glanced at the trunk. You may leave with everything that belongs to you. I am asking only whether Lady Verity ordered you to collect a pierced silver grill from Mr. Bell. Clara's face changed. I don't know what you mean. The ledger page was removed. The writing beneath it remained. Clara looked toward the passage as though measuring escape. Dorothea did not block her path. You can go, she said, but if you leave without telling the truth, Lady Verity will still know what you know. Hugh will still know your brother serves Rothmere House. Distance will not make you safe from people who treat fear as employment. Clara's eyes filled, though no tears fell. You can't protect me. Not without your consent. Julian looked at Dorothea. The sentence struck him as clearly as it struck Clara. Dorothea continued, but I can promise that no servant will lose position merely for telling the truth before named witnesses. Lady Verity will ruin my family. How? Clara's gaze dropped. My father kept accounts for Lord Calder. Years ago, he moved money between estate funds to hide a loss. He meant to replace it. He died before he could. Verity knows. She found the books. Lord Hugh found the creditor who covered the shortage. Clara's voice trembled. They said, my brother and I would be exposed as the children of a thief unless we helped. Dorothea felt the shape of Verity's motive begin to emerge. Did Lady Verity join Hugh to conceal her own family scandal? Clara looked up sharply. Silence answered before words did. Lord Calder sold private letters, she whispered. Not at first. At first he only used one to delay a debt. Then Lord Hugh showed him how much silence could buy. And Verity? Julian asked. Clara looked at him with something close to bitterness. She discovered it after Lord Adrian began asking questions. She said she was protecting her father. Then she learned she could place men beside the right listeners, move servants at the right hour, and decide which letter reached which hand. The woman who moved the doors, Dorothea said. Clara's mouth parted. Lord Adrian called her that. Julian went still. You heard him? Once. He confronted her in the music cabinet at Calder House. He said, Hugh gathered names. But she moved the doors. After that, she told me to copy every seating proof before it went to the printer. Dorothea stepped closer, though she kept space between them. Where is the black portfolio? I don't know. Did you collect the duplicate grill? Clara nodded once. I gave it to Lady Verity. And the original? She said she had a way to obtain it after the Duchess arrived. Dorothea felt the vinaigrette at her wrist grow colder. Why are you leaving now? Because she sent word that the 3rd bell would clear the north passage at the Calder breakfast. She told me to be ready to move a music folio. From where? The cabinet room. To whom? Clara shook her head. She never says names. Footsteps approached from the service corridor. Mr. Talbot appeared with a folded note for Julian. He read it, then handed it to Dorothea. The diplomatic breakfast at Calder House had been moved to Rothmere House due to a damaged ceiling in the Calder dining room. Verity apologized for the inconvenience and expressed confidence that the Duchess would welcome the opportunity to host. Lady Agnes, who had followed at a measured pace, gave a humorless laugh. She means to bring the passage into your own house. Dorothea looked at Clara. Does Rothmere have a north passage cleared by the third bell? Clara glanced toward the house. The upper footman moves south when the breakfast bell rings. The north stair is left empty for several minutes. Mrs. Ellison's face hardened. Only household staff should know that. Mr. Vale knows every bell schedule, Julian said. Clara went pale. My brother would never help Hugh willingly. Willingly may not be required, Dorothea replied. Julian turned to Mr. Talbot. Find Vale. Quietly. No. Dorothea's voice stopped him. Julian looked at her. He may be in danger, and you are about to remove him without telling Clara what you intend. I meant to place him somewhere protected until we understand his role. Without asking either of them. The old pattern stood between them, unmistakable. Julian looked at Clara's frightened face, then back to Dorothea. You are right. He turned to Clara. I intended to arrange lodging where Hugh could not reach you or your brother. I should have asked first. Clara stared at him, surprised by the admission. Would you accept such protection? He asked. Only if my brother comes too. Agreed. Dorothea held Julian's gaze, and she chooses where. Yes, Mr. Talbot left to find Mr. Vale. Clara remained beneath Mrs. Ellison's care, not custody. Dorothea returned to the east drawing room with Julian and spread the Rothmere floor plan across the table. The venue change is not an inconvenience, she said. It is the plan. Julian positioned himself at her right. Verity believes your rooms give her access to the vinaigrette. Hugh believes I still hold the original grill. And Clara says Verity intends to move a folio at the third bell. Dorothea traced the north passage with one finger. Then the breakfast is not meant to expose a message. It is meant to move the evidence while everyone watches me. Julian's expression hardened. I will cancel it. No. Dorothea, you are doing it again. He stopped. I am trying to keep you from another humiliation by choosing absence for me. Julian looked down at the floor plan. The struggle in him was visible now, not hidden behind rank. What do you choose? The breakfast proceeds. No servant is used without knowledge. Clara decides whether she participates. Every key is recorded. The north passage is watched, but not blocked, and no one changes the plan without telling me. Agreed. This time he said it slowly. Mrs. Ellison entered before Dorothea could continue. Her face was controlled, but urgency tightened her voice. Your Graces, Mr. Vale is gone. Julian stood. Gone where? No one knows. His office is open. His coat remains. The duplicate key register is missing. Dorothea looked toward the corridor beyond the open door. Somewhere inside Rothmere House, a man with access to every bell, passage, and private drawer had vanished less than 3 days before the breakfast. The villains no longer needed to enter the house. One of their roots was already moving through it. The original grill was gone before breakfast preparations began. Dorothea discovered the exchange at dawn, when she opened the silver vinaigrette beneath the lamp in the east suite and saw laurel where thyme should have been. The difference was almost too small to detect. One leaf curved outward, another narrowed toward the center flower. To anyone who had not carried the object through years of fear, it would have looked unchanged. Dorothea touched the altered edge once. then closed the lid. Louise. The young woman entered from the dressing room with a tray of hot water. Lock the outer door. Louise obeyed at once. Lady Agnes, already awake in the adjoining chamber, came in fastening the cuffs of her mourning robe. What has happened? Dorothea placed the vinaigrette on the writing desk. Someone exchanged the grill during the night. Louise went pale. That can't be. I kept the case beside me until her grace retired. And afterward, I put it on the dressing table. Was the door locked? Yes, the connecting door, locked from this side. Lady Agnes looked toward the narrow service door near the wardrobe. And that one? Louise swallowed. Mrs. Ellison said only the housekeeper and the Duke's secretary held keys. Dorothea did not answer. Mr. Vale had vanished with the duplicate key register. The exchange could have occurred after she slept, through a door whose security she had trusted because Julian's household called it secure. She lifted the grill with a card. Beneath it lay no hidden slip, only the scented sponge and a faint line of fresh silver dust. "Do not send for Julian yet," she said. Lady Agnes studied her. "You intend to examine the room first." "I intend to know what I am telling him before he enters." Louise searched the dressing table, drawers, and floorboards nearest the service door. Nothing appeared until she moved the vinaigrette case in which spare scent sponges were kept. Beneath it rested a second silver grill wrapped in tissue. "Your Grace." Dorothea unfolded it. This one bore a true time pattern, but the enlarged openings were wrong. Mr. Bell had called such work a decoy. They now possessed 2 false grills and no original. "Someone wants us to believe we recovered it," Dorothea said. Lady Agnes looked toward the locked door. "Or to waste time deciding which false object is real." Dorothea rang for Mrs. Ellison and requested Mr. Bell, Mr. Talbot, and Julian under the written conditions already established. Julian arrived first. He stopped outside until Louise opened the door and Dorothea invited him in. His gaze went directly to the 2 grills on the desk. Which was in the vinaigrette? The laurel duplicate, and the other, hidden beneath the scent case. He did not touch either. The original, missing. Julian looked toward the service door. Vale had a key. So did Mrs. Ellison. "I do not remove a name from consideration because loyalty would be convenient." The words were not cruel. They were learned from him. Julian accepted them. "What do you need?" Every key examined. Every servant who entered this corridor named. No room searched without a witness. No one detained merely because fear makes them awkward. "Agreed. And you will not cancel the breakfast." His expression tightened. "The evidence has been compromised. That is why the breakfast matters. You may be carrying the duplicate Hugh expects to expose. Then let him expose it. Dorothea, if the grill is false, Mr. Bell can prove it. If the original appears elsewhere, we learn who moved it." Julian looked toward the vinaigrette. "And if neither happens, then I speak without it." The answer unsettled him because it removed the object from the center of her defense. The grill was the clearest proof. No, it was the easiest proof. Mr. Bell arrived within the hour. He confirmed both grills were recent work. The laurel duplicate matched the order placed through Hugh's valet. The time decoy had been cut later and less skillfully. The original carried a shallow scratch near the 5th opening where Dorothea's mother had once forced the plate with a hairpin. Neither false grill bore it. "Could the original still be used?" Mr. Talbot asked. "Certainly," Mr. Bell said. "Its value is not diminished by age." "Then whoever took it intends to read or authenticate something," Dorothea said. Julian turned to Mrs. Ellison, who entered the east corridor. Only Louise, Lady Agnes, 2 footmen moving trunks, and Clara Vale before midnight. Louise stared. "Clara," Mrs. Ellison nodded. "She asked for her grace. I told her the Duchess had retired. She said she wished to return a ribbon and left it with me." Mrs. Ellison produced a folded strip of blue silk. Louise recognized it as the ribbon Hugh had used at Calder House. Dorothea touched the cloth. She was sending a message. "Or testing whether the room was accessible," Julian said. "Both may be true." A footman announced the arrival of Thomas Rook, Lord Adrian's former valet. Julian had sent for him the previous night after learning Mr. Vale was missing. Rook entered, carrying an old leather case and the cautious bearing of a servant accustomed to truths above his station. Dorothea showed him the crescent mark copied from the missing portfolio. "Did Lord Adrian use this?" "Yes, Your Grace, on the clasp of what he called the mourning book." "Why that name?" "Because every name inside belonged to someone mourning in private. A debt, a letter, a secret child, a promise made where witnesses could not hear." Julian's face tightened. Did he ever name the person directing the system? Not fully. He wrote one line repeatedly. Rook opened the leather case and removed a folded scrap in Adrian's hand. "Cresswell gathers the names. The lady moves the doors." "Verity," Julian said. Rook looked at him. His lordship once trusted her. That made the discovery worse. "What did she move?" Dorothea asked. "Seats, invitations, servants, even conversations. She placed the right person beside the wrong ear." Dorothea glanced at Julian's scar. Verity's choice of his left side had never been accidental. Rook continued. "Lord Adrian believed the black portfolio could not be carried openly once she knew he suspected her. He hid proof inside ordinary music." "A folio," Dorothea said, "with a hollow back." "Yes." "Did it contain the grill?" "I never saw the grill. Only a silver plate wrapped in tissue." The original might have been Adrian's reading key before it became Dorothea's inheritance. The thought reached deeper than mystery. Her mother had not merely carried a comforting object. She had carried a piece of the method that killed one man and ruined another. A knock sounded at the open door. Clara Vale stood outside, white-faced and without her cloak. Mrs. Ellison moved toward her, but Dorothea raised a hand. "Let her enter." Clara stepped inside and looked first at Julian, then at the 2 false grills. Her remaining courage seemed to fail. "I took the original," she said. Louise inhaled sharply. Julian did not move. Dorothea kept her voice even. "When?" "Last night. Lady Verity ordered me to enter through the service door, Mr. Vale had left the key where she said he would." "Where is your brother?" "I don't know." "Why did you obey?" Clara's hands twisted together. "She said Hugh would expose our father and ruin my brother if I refused. She said the Duchess wouldn't be harmed, only confused long enough for the music folio to leave the house." "Did you give her the grill?" "No." Clara looked toward Dorothea at last. "I couldn't." "Where did you put it?" "Inside a blue music folio in the East Passage cabinet. I thought I could recover it this morning and bring it to you." Julian's gaze sharpened. "And the folio?" "Gone." Silence gathered around them. Clara continued in a whisper. "The cabinet was empty before dawn." "Who knew where you placed it?" Dorothea asked. "Lady Verity knew I had been ordered to use that cabinet. My brother knew the bell schedule. Lord Hugh knew the 3rd bell would clear the North Passage." "Did you tell any of them you disobeyed?" "No." "Then one of them took the folio expecting the original grill to be inside." Clara nodded. Mr. Talbot unfolded the Rothmere floor plan. "The North Passage opens beside the breakfast room. At the 3rd bell, 2 upper footmen move south, and the under butler enters the wine room." Leaving 4 minutes, Mrs. Ellison said. Julian looked at Dorothea. We can close the passage. No, the folio may still be moved through it. That is why we leave it open, and if Hugh removes it before we identify him, then we watch who expects it. Dorothea placed the false laurel grill back inside the vinaigrette. Mr. Bell stared. Your Grace, that is the duplicate. Hugh believes I carry the wrong grill. Let him see what he expects. She turned to Clara. You will not go near the passage unless you choose to. Clara swallowed. I want to help. Wanting to escape fear is not the same as choosing danger. Then I choose to stand where Lady Verity expects me and stop before I take the folio. Dorothea studied her, then nodded. You will have witnesses within sight. No locked doors. Julian's first instinct rose visibly. He wanted more guards, fewer risks, complete control. Instead, he asked, Does the plan respect your terms? Dorothea considered the open passage, the false grill, the missing folio, Clara's choice, and the uncertainty no one could remove. Yes. Then I will not change it. The first breakfast bell sounded below. Servants began opening the formal rooms. Dorothea fastened the vinaigrette at her wrist. Julian stood beside her, his right ear turned toward her voice. What if the folio does not appear? He asked. Then we learn the evidence is already in the room. And if Verity accuses you before we recover the original? Dorothea looked toward the staircase where guests would soon arrive. Then she will discover the grill was never the only thing I understood. The second bell rang. Clara moved toward the north passage under Mrs. Ellison's watch. Somewhere inside Rothmere House, the missing folio, the original grill, and perhaps Adrian's mourning book were already in motion. The third bell had not yet sounded. The breakfast room glittered with silver, porcelain, and restrained suspicion. Dorothea entered on Julian's arm, while the third bell still waited somewhere in the walls. Verity stood near the windows in pale grey silk, composed enough to suggest that nothing in the house could surprise her. Hugh occupied the place opposite Dorothea. The under-secretary sat 2 seats away with his wife, while Mr. Talbot and Thomas Rook remained near the sideboard as named witnesses rather than guests. Mr. Bell had been placed discreetly beside the bookcase with his spectacles case in hand. Clara waited beyond the open north passage under Mrs. Ellison's watch. No door was locked. No servant moved without knowing why. Julian drew out Dorothea's chair, then shifted his own by several inches so that his right ear faced her. Verity noticed. Have I displaced you, Rothmere? She asked from his left. No, Julian said. I have corrected the angle. Dorothea sat. The vinaigrette rested at her wrist with the false laurel grill beneath its lid. Hugh's gaze touched it once, then moved away too carefully. Breakfast began. Servants brought coffee, rolls, fruit, and cold meats. Conversation circled around coastal weather, diplomatic delays, and the inconvenience of damaged ceilings at Calder House. Every harmless subject sharpened the tension beneath it. Dorothea watched Verity direct the room without appearing to do so. A glance sent one maid toward the south door. A lifted finger delayed a footman. A question to Julian's left forced him to turn his head away from Dorothea. He answered only after shifting his chair again. Verity's smile thinned. Your Grace has become particular about hearing, she said. I have become particular about who chooses where I listen, Julian replied. Hugh set down his cup. An admirable reform. Dorothea looked at him. Reform usually follows exposure, or regret. Sometimes both. The first course was cleared. The under-butler approached the bell pull. Dorothea felt every nerve in her body tighten, though her hands remained still. Julian did not look at the passage. He looked at her. The third bell rang. Its sound travelled through the house with polished innocence. 2 upper footmen left by the south door. The under-butler moved toward the wine-room. Beyond the breakfast-room arch, Clara stepped into the north passage exactly as Verity expected. Then nothing happened. No valet appeared. No Mr. Vale emerged. No music folio changed hands. Clara reached the cabinet, opened it, and found only empty shelves. Mrs. Ellison gave the smallest signal. The plan had failed. Hugh leaned back, almost relaxed. Verity did not move at all. That stillness was the first proof Dorothea trusted. She had expected movement. Instead, she had brought whatever mattered into the room. "How unfortunate," Hugh said lightly. "What is?" the under-secretary asked. Hugh smiled. "A servant appears to have lost her purpose." Clara stopped in the passage. Dorothea turned toward him. "You knew she had one." "I inferred it from the way everyone is watching the door." "Inference again," Dorothea said. "Your favorite refuge." Verity placed her napkin beside her plate. "This performance has continued long enough. We were invited here to examine a missing route reference, not to observe servants wander through corridors." "You requested the venue," Lady Agnes said, "and the household arrangement," Dorothea added. Verity's gaze settled on the vinaigrette. "Then perhaps we should begin with the object already linked to the missing figures." The under-secretary looked toward Dorothea. "Your Grace, you are not compelled to open anything." "I know." Dorothea unfastened the chain. "That is why the choice remains mine." She placed the silver case on the table and opened it. The scented sponge appeared. She lifted the grill. Mr. Bell approached and examined the pattern. "Laurel," he said, "cut to resemble thyme. This is the duplicate commissioned through Lord Cresswell's valet." Hugh's expression remained smooth, a craftsman's claim. "A ledger impression, payment record, and surviving order support it," Mr. Talbot said. Dorothea looked at Hugh. "You expected this grill to be found on me." "I expected nothing. Then you will not mind that it proves nothing against me." Verity's composure sharpened. "Where is the original?" "Missing." A murmur moved around the table. Hugh smiled at last. "How convenient." "No," Dorothea said. "Convenience would be finding it exactly where I planned." She looked toward the empty north passage. The plan failed. Julian turned slightly toward her. He had not expected the admission. Neither had Hugh. Dorothea continued. "The folio was gone before the bell. Mr. Vale did not appear. Lord Cresswell's valet did not move. If I depended upon the grill, I would have nothing." Verity's eyes narrowed. "Then you have nothing. I have knowledge." Dorothea faced the room. Only Lady Verity controlled the seating at Calder House. Only Hugh knew the hand kiss concealed a transfer. Only someone with access to Rothmere's bell schedule could clear the north passage. Only a person already inside my rooms could exchange the grill. These facts do not require the original silver. Hugh gave a quiet laugh. "Facts? You have suspicions arranged attractively. Then explain Clara Vale." Verity looked toward the passage. "A frightened maid." "A frightened maid you ordered to collect the duplicate grill 6 weeks before my wedding." Clara stepped into the room. Her face was pale, but her voice did not fail. "She did." Verity turned. "You should be careful." "I've been careful for years," Clara said. "That's why I know what fear costs." Hugh's smile disappeared. Clara continued. "Lady Verity ordered me to copy seating proofs, change bell labels, and move music folios. She said my brother would lose his post, and my father's accounts would be exposed if I refused." "A servant saving herself with lies," Verity said. "Then why did you know the original grill would be in the East Passage cabinet?" Dorothea asked. Verity's answer came one breath too soon. Because Clara placed it there. Silence struck the room. Clara had never said where she hid it in Verity's presence. Verity realized the mistake. Hugh looked at her with sudden contempt. You said the folio was secure. You said the valet would take it. Their alliance fractured in a single exchange. Dorothea looked toward the sideboard. A blue music case rested there among the breakfast selections. She had noticed it when entering, but not until now did she see the narrow strip of black ribbon beneath Verity's shawl. Thomas Rook stepped forward. That clasp, he said, silver crescent under the ribbon. It belonged to Lord Adrian. Verity rose. You will not touch my music. Julian stood with her. In this house, before these witnesses, you will not remove it. He did not reach for Dorothea or speak for her. He controlled the door, not the truth. Verity looked toward Hugh. He looked away. The Under-Secretary nodded to Mr. Talbot. Open it. Mr. Talbot brought the case to the table. Beneath sheets of Italian music lay a hollow backing. Inside rested a black portfolio with a silver crescent clasp. The original time grill had been pressed into a narrow slot along the spine. Mr. Bell identified the old scratch near the fifth opening. Dorothea's mother's mark. Her breath caught, but she remained standing. Mr. Talbot opened the portfolio. Pages of names, debts, letters, and payments filled the leather cover. Several entries carried Hugh's initials. Others marked Verity's seating changes. Near the center lay a folded memorandum in Adrian's hand. Julian recognized the writing before anyone read it. Dorothea unfolded the page. Sir Matthew Langford carried the first sealed note without knowledge of its alteration. Upon learning the route was compromised, he refused a second request and warned me not to trust the social papers. If harm follows, blame must not rest upon him. For one moment, the room vanished. Dorothea saw only her father's name restored by the dead man. Julian had loved more than truth. Her fingers trembled once. She steadied the page against the table. My father told the truth, she said. Julian's face broke open with grief. Yes, no defense followed, no excuse. Hugh rose abruptly. A memorandum proves nothing without context. The Under-Secretary took the portfolio. It proves enough to secure every document here and require formal statements. He ordered the doors watched, not locked. Hugh and Verity would remain until their accounts were recorded. The papers would go under seal to Whitehall and then to the magistrates. Verity looked at Dorothea with hatred stripped of elegance. You were never meant to understand the grill. Dorothea met her gaze. That was your mistake. You believed silence meant ignorance. Julian waited until the portfolio had been sealed. Then he stepped away from his chair and faced the witnesses. Before this inquiry leaves my house, House Ashcombe must answer for its own part. Dorothea looked at him. He continued, I refused Adrian an escort. After he warned me, the route was unsafe. I ignored information that should have stopped him. I condemned Sir Matthew Langford without complete proof because certainty was easier than grief. Later, I used my wife as bait and called it protection. The room remained silent. The Duchess did not merely prove her innocence. She preserved the evidence, protected the coerced, and saw the pattern I refused to see. Every truth established this morning exists because she was willing to speak after I ordered her into silence. Julian turned toward Dorothea. He did not ask forgiveness. He did not reach for her. I was wrong. Dorothea held Adrian's memorandum against her heart. You have finally told the truth before it became safe. Julian lowered his head. Yes. She looked around the room that Verity had tried to arrange around her. The servants knew why they stood where they stood. Clara was no longer alone. Her father's name was clean. The Duke beside her had surrendered not his rank, but his right to use it against her. Dorothea closed the vinaigrette around the recovered thyme grill. "That is the first thing I have trusted today," she said. 6 weeks later, Dorothea opened the silver vinaigrette beneath the beech trees at Merwick Park and found only thyme. No coded paper rested beneath the grill. No crescent marked the corner of a hidden slip. A single green sprig lay across the pierced silver where danger had once traveled in silence. Morning light moved over the open case and caught the old scratch near the 5th opening, the mark her mother had made years before with the hairpin. Dorothea touched it once, then looked toward the drive. Julian was due before 11. He had written each week since the breakfast at Rothmere House, 1 letter every 7 days. Never more. Never delivered by a servant instructed to wait for an answer. The first had contained a full account of the inquiry. Hugh's creditor network had collapsed when the black portfolio exposed the names behind his extensions and private arrangements. Several men who had once protected him withdrew their support before formal proceedings even began. He had been denied access to confidential households while the magistrates examined the evidence. The second letter concerned Verity. Her father had taken her from London after the Under-Secretary formally barred her from diplomatic gatherings. She still claimed she had begun by protecting her family, but the surviving records showed how quickly protection had become control. The third letter concerned Clara and Mr. Vale. Clara had chosen service in the household of the Under-Secretary's widowed sister, where no one could threaten her with the secrets of her father's accounts. Mr. Vale had given a complete statement concerning the keys, the bell schedule, and Verity's instructions. He had not been prosecuted for acts committed under coercion, though he had resigned from House Ashcombe and accepted a quieter post far from confidential correspondence. The fourth letter concerned Rothmere House. Every private room key was now entered in a household book. No sealed packet left without 2 witnessed signatures. No servant carried private instructions without knowing from whom they came. Julian had written the reforms plainly, without presenting them as proof of his virtue. The 5th letter contained no inquiry, no legal account, and no mention of Hugh or Verity. It contained Adrian, not the brother preserved in Julian's grief, but the man who mislaid his gloves, despised boiled cabbage, laughed in chapel when he should not, and once climbed a garden wall because the gate was 10 yards farther away. Dorothea had read that letter twice. Beside the vinaigrette lay the 6th, still sealed. Lady Agnes sat opposite beneath a striped parasol, though the morning sun had barely cleared the trees. "You invited him," she said. "I did." "Then open the letter before he arrives. It would be inconvenient if it announces that has become sensible enough to stay away." Dorothea slid one finger beneath the seal. The message was brief. "I will arrive at 11 if your invitation still stands. I have made no arrangements beyond the journey. I will leave whenever you ask." Dorothea folded it. "He has learned not to bring a plan." Lady Agnes gave a satisfied nod. "That may be the most improbable event in the entire affair." A servant approached from the terrace, carrying a leather folder. "For your grace." "Delivered from Whitehall." Dorothea opened it. Inside lay the formal correction she had been waiting for. Sir Matthew Langford had been cleared of knowing participation in the compromised correspondence. Adrian's memorandum had been accepted as evidence. That he carried the first sealed note without knowledge of its alteration, refused a second request, and warned that the route was unsafe. The letter bore the Under-Secretary's seal. Dorothea read the lines slowly. Her father's name looked different when placed beside truth, not lighter. Nothing could restore the months taken from him, yet the accusation no longer belonged to history, simply because powerful men had repeated it. Lady Agnes reached across the table. He should have lived to see that. Yes. Dorothea kept her voice steady, though grief pressed behind it. He should have. She placed the correction beside the open vinaigrette. At 5 minutes past 11, Julian appeared at the far end of the beach walk. He came without outriders or a second carriage. One groom followed at a distance with his horse. Julian wore a dark country coat, and the absence of formal black made him look less like the duke who had married her and more like the man who had finally learned how much rank could conceal. He stopped several feet from the table. Lady Agnes. Dorothea, no title, no claim. Dorothea indicated the empty chair. You may sit. Julian moved it slightly before lowering himself, placing his right ear toward her. The gesture had become so familiar that it hurt in a gentler way now. Lady Agnes rose with suspicious energy. I have remembered a grave disagreement with Mrs. Pelling regarding the jam cupboard. Do you? Dorothea asked. Not yet. I shall discover it on the way. She left them beneath the trees. Julian looked toward the formal correction. It arrived. This morning, Talbot said the language would be complete. It is. Your father's name will be corrected in every household that received the earlier accusation. Dorothea studied him, including yours, first in mine. He placed a folded paper on the table, but did not push it toward her. The entry has already been made in the Ashcombe family record. It states that Sir Matthew warned Adrian and that I judged him without sufficient proof. Dorothea looked at the paper, then at Julian. You did not soften your part. No. Good. He accepted the word without asking for more. The quiet between them did not feel empty. It felt chosen. Why did you write each week? Dorothea asked. Because I had spent too long deciding when you should hear from me. And why did you never ask me to return? Because returning had to be your choice, not evidence that my apology succeeded. Dorothea turned the vinaigrette between her fingers. Forgiveness will not restore the marriage we began. I do not want that marriage restored. His answer came at once. It was built on punishment. And duty. Duty is not nothing. Julian met her eyes. But it cannot be the only thing holding two people in the same house. Dorothea looked toward Merwick's pale stone front beyond the lawn. If I return to London, I will not return as a wife absorbed into your decisions. Agreed. Do not answer before you hear all of it. Julian closed his mouth and waited. Dorothea continued. I will spend part of each month here. Merwick's household will answer to me in practice, whether the legal settlement is complete or not. Talbot has drafted an arrangement granting you control of the household income. Her expression cooled. Julian's stopped himself. He drafted it. Nothing has been executed. I should have asked before mentioning it. Better, slowly better, very slowly. A faint change touched his mouth, almost a smile. Dorothea continued. No punishment by silence, never again. No concealed protection. I will tell you before I act on anything that concerns you. No use of my name, rooms, servants, or belongings without my consent. Yes. And when you believe you know, what is safest? Julian looked down at his hands, then back at her. I will ask what safety means to you. That answer reached farther than agreement. Dorothea let the silence hold it. Julian reached inside his coat, then paused. May I show you something? Yes. He withdrew the unfinished wedding toast. The paper had been flattened, but the old fold remained. Dorothea recognized the first line in her own hand. To a house made honorable not by silence, but by truth. Beneath it stood the sentence she had added before the breakfast. To truth freely spoken. Julian placed the page between them. I kept what I refused to hear. Dorothea looked at him. You did not know the rest. No, you never allowed me to say it. I know. She took up the pencil lying beside the vinaigrette and added one final line. To a house where truth is not punished for arriving in a woman's voice. Dorothea read it aloud. Julian listened without interruption, his whole body angled toward her. When she finished, he remained silent until she lowered the page. May I say something? He asked. The reversal in the question moved through her more deeply than any apology. You may. I love you. The words were simple. He did not follow them with a promise, a plea, or an expectation. Dorothea looked at him for a long moment. Love does not repair what happened. I know. It does not purchase forgiveness. I know. Then what do you expect it to do? Julian's expression softened with something like sorrow. Nothing. I only expected it to be true. Dorothea felt her breath catch. She looked toward the open vinaigrette, the formal correction of her father's name, and the unfinished toast, now complete, beneath her hand. I cannot love you yet in the way you hope, she said. Julian's face remained still. Dorothea continued, but I have begun to choose you in the way I trust. Something in him gave way, not into triumph, but relief held carefully enough not to frighten her. Dorothea placed her hand palm upward on the table. Julian looked at it, then at her. May I? Yes. His fingers closed around hers with gentleness and no claim. And may I kiss you? Dorothea listened to the leaves above them, the distant wheels on the gravel drive, and the steady patience in the man waiting for her answer. You may. The kiss was brief and careful. When he drew back, he did not ask for more. Dorothea picked up his 6th letter and opened it fully. The final paragraph contained no report, only a memory of Adrian standing in an orangery with orange blossom in his hair after disturbing a branch. Dorothea began to read it aloud. Julian remained beside her, his good ear turned toward her voice. On the table between them, the vinaigrette stayed open beneath the morning light, its time resting freely above the grill. Julian did not speak until she had finished.